This session of the Santa Barbara School Board for Tuesday, June 9th, 2009. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, so please rise. And we do have Spanish translation available.
Esperanza Villegas, would you please introduce yourself?
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Esperanza Villegas y esta noche estoy aquí para traducir. Si alguno de ustedes necesita ayuda, me puede encontrar en la parte trasera de esta sala.
Thank you. We have headsets available for the hearing impaired. Please notify a staff member if you need one. Introductions, proclamations, presentations, or recognitions.
Good. Child Development, Ron Zecker, would you please come up to the podium here? Child Development Programs, Ron Zecker is with us this evening to share information about the Home Instruction for Parents of Preschool Youngsters, a program we affectionately call HIPPY.
Yes. And I'm going to pass these out. If you could just pass them along. You'll find most of the information about the program in there, so I'm not going to repeat it.
Okay.
But I wanted to take the opportunity tonight just to let you know that the HIPPY program does exist, and we are not a throwback from the 60s. It is a comprehensive parent education program where parents receive weekly home visits with a curriculum that they in turn do with their children over the course of the week. And it's developmentally appropriate, and it's really a school readiness program. And our assessments that we do with the students that we do at the beginning of the year, end of the year, and as they enter kindergarten demonstrate that they start kindergarten basically at the same level that children do that have been in preschool programs. And our program started in 2000 here in Santa Barbara with 45 children, and it's grown to serve families of over 160 children each year. We're funded by First Five state funding and local private foundations. So I'm not here to ask for any funding. However, we are possibly looking at shrinking a little bit next year and adjusting our program as there's been some cuts in funding, but we will remain open and serve as many families as we can next year. We also were one of the programs, along with Cleveland Elementary School, that piloted the Waterford Early Reading Program. And that has been a great addition to our program as an English language acquisition component where children and their parents work on the computer together, learning English and early reading skills. And so that's something that we're proud of being a part of. I'd actually just like to offer you an opportunity to answer or to ask any questions that you may have, and I can answer them. And you can also, after reading the annual report, if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer questions at another time through email or over the phone.
Thank you so much. HIPPY, obviously, it's got a funny name, but it
Yes, it
provides
does.
a fantastic service for students in our district, for our youngest students and the families that are coming in. So we highly appreciate it. Any comments, quick comments, questions from the board? No? Yeah.
Well, maybe I could just add a little. Ron's got a great staff, and board members, if you would ever like to go into one of the home visitations where a teacher goes in, works with the parent on what the lessons were the previous week, what the lessons will be this next week, and here are the materials, let me show you how to do some of these things. It is a real eye-opener, and there's no better way to understand the program than just that 1 hour visitation. So I'm sure that, that Ron would welcome you on
Absolutely.
one of these one of these home visits.
Have you ever videoed a demonstration of what you do? Of what
No.
happens? No.
I think one of the reasons the program works so well is that our home visitors develop a very strong sense of trust with the families that they work with. And as a result, we are able to make referrals for different programs that they may need besides the HIPPY program for, family support, food, basic living needs, things like that. And so we really try to honor that relationship. However, there are many families who are open to having someone come and observe, as some of the personnel here at Santa Barbara School District have come to observe.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Ron. We do have one other presentation. We recently had 39 people who have either already retired from the districts earlier this year or who will be retiring by the end of this year. So 39 retirees for this school year 2008-09. Many have taken advantage of the golden handshake we put in place at the end of last year, and board members, you'll recall that that was specifically for our classified personnel, and that was through the state. That was a special program that we were able to put together through the state. In all, it was a wonderful group of retirees, and while they will be missed, their departure also saves jobs for people who have been given layoff notices. Elaine Alvarado and Dr. Chris Robertson from our personnel office are here to honor employees tonight with 30 years or more of service to the districts. And these are not all retirees, am I right, Dr. Robertson?
That's right.
But these are people who have poured 30 years of their lives into working with children and working with our programs here in our district.
Thank you, Dr. Sorvis, and good evening. It is our pleasure to be here tonight to honor those individuals who have given 30 or more years to the students and staff in the Santa Barbara School Districts. The total sum of the years of service represented with the 8 employees that we're honoring tonight is 255 years. I'd like to ask Dr. Sarvis to come down and help us with our presentation. And as I call your names, would you please come forward and remain standing up here until I call all honorees. We have some people who are not here tonight, and I will let you know who those individuals are, but for those of you who are, please make sure you do come up here, okay? For 30 years of service, Joseph Escoto, Santa Barbara High School. Lisa Keene, Adams Elementary. And I don't believe the following people are here, but I would like to tell you who else has 30 years of service. That's Margaret Holbrook from Goleta Valley Junior High School, Jane Adabo Roberts, San Marcos High School, Michelle MacArthur, District Special Education Staff, and Mary Lou Diaz, Harding Elementary. The next individual I'd like to honor has been in the district for 35 years, even 35 years of service. So would Jacqueline Pruitt please come up from Cleveland Elementary. And probably one of the more amazing amounts of time that someone can spend in the district and dedicate their life is 40 years of service. And this gentleman is retiring. I'd like to honor Pete Rellis for 40 years of service. I want to take this time to thank you for the 30-plus amazing years of service to the Santa Barbara School Districts, but the district would also like to acknowledge the family and friends who support you and have shared you with us for all of these years. Thank you very much. Would you stand, your family and friends of the honorees up here? Thank you.
Keep it up. Any other board members?
I'd like to congratulate and thank all of the staff who have been with us so long, but as a personal friend, I'd just like to honor Pete Rellis as well. And most people do know that Pete was instrumental in starting Cesar Chavez Charter School, and has worked with our students, and especially on behalf of the most underrepresented and often most I won't say neglected, but least served students in our district. And on behalf of the work that I have done with the Latino community, I would like to thank you on behalf of the Latino community, Pete, for all of your work.
All right, superintendent's report.
Well, among the most meaningful and inspirational moments in the school year are the graduation and promotion ceremonies. This year we had 1,522 high school graduates graduating from 12th grade on June 4th. Oh, June 3rd and 4th, excuse me. The student speakers at each graduation spoke from the heart, and we now watch with great anticipation as these promising young adults move on to the next chapter of their lives. Thank you, board members, for covering these many ceremonies with us. The board brief. My office regularly issues a report to the board called the Board Brief. It's a collection of reports and articles on school and district matters. A copy of the May 29 board brief is on display in the reception area, or it can be provided through my office. The May 29 board brief included a number of things. I'll comment on just one of them, and that was a report on district office management positions. At one point, there were 30 district office management positions. 4 years ago, during my first year as superintendent, there were 24 district office management positions, and this year there are 24, again, 24.3 positions, similar to 4 years ago. At one point, we added positions that were categorically funded. We have also reduced positions. The board may recall that we reduced the number of district management positions by 2 just last year, including not filling the assistant superintendent for secondary education position. But we also adopted the School Services of California recommendation to hire 2 new business service positions, and we have since done that. This week, we have a series of professional development trainings. The list includes trainings that are conducted by a lot of our very own people like Michelle Humboldt, and people from outside of the district. I'll get the board a complete list. The list includes career technical education, AVID, critical reading and writing. In fact, we brought Jonathan Lemaster up for that once again. Portal training, portal technology training with Steve Keithley, GATE training, counselor training, various math trainings, a lot of math trainings. We have a new adoption, and we have a long list of math trainings that people are involved in this week. Library media teacher training for our librarians. Equity in education with Just Communities later this week. And special education with Jerice Butterfield running the presentation on legally defensible IEPs. And I've stepped into a number of these. I know Robin Sawaski has as well. And that ends the superintendent's report tonight.
Thank you, and I have to say kudos to Dr. White for getting this organized this year. It's really exciting. I'm going to try to pop in myself tomorrow, at least, to some of these things. It's great as a board member just to go in and peek if you get a chance. So thank you. Yes,
I'd just like to
Mr.
make a
Herron.
comment, and I hope it continues, but you mentioned the board briefs being available at the desk. The last 2 issues of board briefs are also now on the website. So I hope that continues, assuming we have manpower, but I think it's a great addition to have your board briefs available to, what did I say?
People power. We
People
have
power.
people power.
Yeah. Just, I just think that it's great that those board briefs are now available to a much greater degree, and I appreciate that effort very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, on to item C2, the announcement of closed session action. There are 2 items to report out. On item B3, which was conference with legal counsel existing litigation, it was moved by Herron and seconded by Cordero to approve the settlement for $500 in Santa Barbara County Superior Court, case number 1303644. That passed 4-0 with Dr. Noel absent. Dr. Noel will be absent for this entire meeting. And the other item was on B5, and that's the California High School Exit Exam waiver for graduation for students with disabilities. It was moved by Cordero and seconded by Deacon to approve the Casey waivers, and that also passed 4-0. Item C3, public comment. Mr. Herron.
Let me explain what we have here. And if anybody is here to talk about any of the consent items, this is your chance to do it. You will not be able to speak if we get to those consent items individually. So if you haven't turned anything in for the consent calendar, please do. But, Madam Chairman, we have 5. We have about 11 that are general in nature, many with no exact topic they're going to talk about. We have 7 on the 180 adoption, so about 18 requests to speak at this moment on the consent calendar.
Okay,
On the consent calendar.
and so this is for public comment. We typically allow 20 minutes of time, board members. Do we want to give the speakers 2 minutes? Okay, that will run over. That'll run to 36 minutes, but we're running a little early at this point.
Let me mention one other. Lisa Fell has put a request for public comment, but just so you know, Lisa, the intra-district transfer is on the agenda for F2, and that is a topic where we'll be talking about it at that time. And you also asked about budget cuts for elementary school teachers. That is also a conference agenda, so you'll be speaking at that time, not during public comments.
All right, with that, we do ask that speakers line up 3 at a time. Mr. Herron will call the names, 3 names in order, and Mr. Smith will keep time, and we'll try to give you about a 20 or 30-second warning when your time's almost up.
Mr. Abe Jahadmi on the pesticide issue, on D15. Followed by Roxana Stern on CalSafe, followed by Jacqueline Inda, and I believe she's talking about CalSafe.
I'm Abe Jahadami, and Dan Feldhaus, my counterpart at Dos Pueblos High School. We're both athletic directors. We really appreciate you considering using pesticides again at the high schools. When used before, they helped quite a bit, but now they're back all over the fields, the front of the school. All you see is holes and mounds all over, and it is a safety issue. And as athletic directors, we both agree that I hate seeing a kid going out there to one of our fields and knowing in the back of my mind that this kid will come back with a broken leg or blown out knee. And so we really appreciate you considering to do this again, because it's really needed and probably a stronger dosage this time.
When we do our coaches in service at Dos Pueblos, we put it upon our coaches that one of their duties is to make sure the facilities are safe for the students. And this is one area where we are asking you to help us make our facilities safe for our students. We have squirrels and gophers that are overrunning many of our fields, and not only our fields, but just our a couple weeks ago, Debbie Delawan found a squirrel in her office and chased it out. They're pretty rampant out there. So now is a good time. I think the students are going to be gone after summer school. So again, thank you for considering this, and we really hope it works out. So
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Roxana Stern, followed by Jacqueline Inda, followed by Sandy Shrove.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will keep my comments brief. I am here to appeal to you tonight to maintain the funding for the CalSafe program. specifically at San Marcos High School, but of course district-wide. CalSafe is a program that provides prenatal education to our teens who are going to become parents. It provides parenting skills to those teenagers once they do become parents, and it also provides reliable, safe childcare so that our students can continue to come to school while also being parents. This year, the San Marcos CalSafe program served a total of 27 students. 5 of those were young men, and that's a goal that we also have, to have children's fathers involved in their lives just as much as their mothers are. We graduated all 12 of our seniors that participated in our program this year, and we have a need for this program to continue to exist. Because of limited space, we were not able to offer childcare to some of our students who were teens. Those students had to go an independent study route, which arguably is not the best possible appropriate public education in California. We're doing a great deal to try to prevent teenage pregnancy at our site, really addressing students in a variety of ways at every grade level, but we can't ignore that this need exists and it will continue to exist for some time. We have a population that needs to be served. Many of our students are special education as well, and they can't be served if they drop out of school. This is an excellent dropout prevention program that's been in the district for 33 years, and it is also something to serve our students so they can be productive, successful members of our society, and their children can come to San Marcos one day and get their education there as well. So please consider maintaining the funding so we can keep our child care and our instructional programs open for our students at San Marcos. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacqueline Inda, followed by Sandy Shrove, followed by Catherine Abaca.
Okay. Hi. My name is Jacqueline Inda. I'm here as a representative of an organization in town called Esperanza, and I'm really here on behalf of all of the parents in CalSafe. And I know that they will all get a chance to mention something about how important it is. But I think because of the state cuts, they're already looking at not continuing San Marcos CalSafe site, which affects a lot of the kids that are in their senior year and will have to go elsewhere to continue their education. So to keep it brief, one of the things that we would like to see as a community is that this program continues to fund and that this isn't the place to cut, because it's already cut in a statewide. If we cut it even more, then that'll not only limit what's already limited at Santa Barbara High School, but cut even more to the point where they won't be able to function. And at this point, with the state cuts, they're already looking at a very minimal skeletal program at Santa Barbara High School. So because of this, we're definitely here to urge you and hope that this is definitely not the place to cut, and that we continue at least the minimal things that we have so far.
Thank you. Sandy Shrove, followed by Catherine Abaca, followed by Brenda Vega.
I'm sorry, Mr. Heron, I have 2 public comment requests in. Can you tell me which one I'm on?
This is Special Ed Interim Director.
If this is for item C3 public comment, you have one opportunity to speak, so you need to combine both together.
Oh,
If
okay.
this is it.
I have 2 topics in, so I will conflate them.
Okay.
Regarding the Special Ed Interim Director, last December-ish, I came before you and asked that you defer hiring an interim special education director, that you sock the money away, await the FCMAT report, and then make a decision about administrative structure following the recommendations. And the board voted instead to hire an interim director. As you know, I am a non-attorney special education advocate in private practice. I have represented students in 8 different districts throughout this county over the last several years. Unfortunately, in the time that Dr. Hilton has been the interim special education director, I have represented 6 families in this district, and none of them has resolved the IEP to date. Every other student that I have represented in this county, in any other district, has resolved after 1 or 2 meetings. I am on my 3rd and 4th meeting with some of these situations, and they are ongoing. So just to give you some feedback about the work of your interim director, it doesn't seem to be cost effective from where I sit. Regarding Read 180 and the potential adoption of that language intervention program, I have concerns regarding cost and implementation and a variety of things, but in particular, I have concerns about the criterion being utilized to refer students for the program. Right now, the policy that's being bandied about, which of course hasn't even been discussed or voted on as a board because you haven't adopted the program yet, but decisions are being made and referenced in IEP meetings, and I can attest to that because I had an IEP meeting just recently where it became an issue. They are using the ELA
One moment.
STAR score.
I'd like to expect another 30 seconds, is that?
Yeah.
Another-
Thank you. They're using an ELA STAR score of 325 as the break point where a child would be referred. Anything below 325, student is referred. As educators and parents, we are told not to put a tremendous amount of weight on standardized test scores, that these are a snapshot of a child's performance on that test at that time, and they are not to be interpreted in any sort of generalized or comprehensive sense. And yet, here the district is talking about utilizing a single criterion score, which, by the way, is an average of 5 subtest scores. It's not even a score on a test itself. It's a measure of central tendency of 5 other scores
Can you
to
wrap it up?
get to a watershed point and make a decision that impacts the child's entire educational placement, particularly students with special needs. This criterion is being used to override the
Okay, you-
decision-making of the IEP team, which is a violation of federal law. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Abaca, followed by Brenda Vega, followed by Ms. Cabrera.
I never used to need these. Good evening, board members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about the proposed implementation of READ 180. I have 2 very important things that I think you should know about READ 180, but in this climate of fiscal shortfalls, I find it totally irresponsible for the district to entertain purchasing this $1.5 million expense. I'd like to outline the 2 prominent reasons. This is a computer-driven component. I work with computers, so I know that when you have new systems put in place, they require a lot of support. You have about $17,000 provided to train someone, which I don't think is going to be efficient. New systems always create more and more technological issues that you have to resolve. So I think it's going to cost us more money to keep it going. The other more important thing is that the program as such has not been extensively researched. And the research that's out there is not very strongly conclusive. 7th grade research associated with this program has shown to provide some new skills in 7th grade and while their students are in the program. However, in the 8th grade, when they're mainstreamed back into regular classes without this program, they've lost all the skills that they gained in the 7th grade. In high school, the mildly at-risk students have shown very minor gains. However, the high-risk students have shown no gains at all, more than any other program that they've been tried and true with. So in conclusion, I just wanted to ask the board to reconsider spending all this money at this time. We have so many problems in our district. We need to resolve those problems, and we need to use our money wisely. We don't need to start something new, but we can't even fix what we have going on now. So I would like to ask you to please reconsider implementing this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Brenda Vega, followed by Ms. Cabrera, followed by Edith Perez.
Hi, my name is Brenda, and COSIP helps me a lot because they take care of my daughter for I could go to school. They care for me because they want me to keep going to school for I could get and educated, and for I could give my daughter an example. I am a student at San Marcos High School. I like the school because it's close to my house, and that's easy for me because that way I don't have to wake up my daughter early in the morning. Now I have to come to Santa Barbara High School for my senior year because they are going to close the daycare at San Marcos High School. If they close the daycare at Santa Barbara High School, that's going to be really sad because I don't have nobody to take care of my daughter on the daytime. If they close the daycare, it's going to be hard for me because I could drop out of school, and also it's going to be sad because it's my last year of school, and I already went through 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. If I drop out, I am not going to be able to graduate from high school, and I will not receive my diploma.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening, President and members of the board. My name is Octavio Cabrera.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry I called you miss. I thought it was a young lady behind you. Okay.
So my name is Octavio Cabrera, and I'm just a parent of San Marcos High School. I'm here to talk in behalf of the parents from families that use this program, CalSafe. I think CalSafe is very, very important. Not only because the daycare they provide also help students to achieve good grades, and in many cases 100% graduations. So I have a little personal story that I wanted to share with you all, and it's because even this my personally connects with everything. 7 months ago, I became an unexpected grandparent. So at that time, my daughter grades were up and down. So then, as the time go along, the point now is that my daughter grades are way up. Like, she's a straight A student, and she is graduated on January, and that I think make the school look good, the district look good, and definitely make me very good. So I'll asking you again for you reconsider not to cut the CalSafe program. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very much. Ms. Perez, followed by Linda Oliveira, followed by Anna Karatko.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Edith Pérez y soy estudiante de Santa Barbara High School.
She studies at Santa Barbara High School.
Y quiero decir que corte en CalSafe significa para mí.
She wants to let you know that if you cut CalSafe, it means for her
Que dejaría a un lado mis sueños de seguir estudiando.
to leave on the side her dreams to keep studying.
Y poder graduarme y poder cumplir mis sueños.
And finish her school and graduate and accomplish her dreams.
CalSafe me ha ayudado a tener más confianza en mí misma.
CalSafe has helped her to have more confidence.
Y a saber que todo lo que quiera, todo lo puedo lograr.
And to know that whatever she wants to accomplish, she can accomplish.
Y me han ayudado a practicar más mi inglés.
And she's getting help practicing her English.
En mis grados me han ayudado a mejorar. Cuando entré a este programa tenía Ds y ahora tengo As y Bs.
When she started this program, she was getting Ds and Cs, and now she's getting Bs.
Porque siempre me están dando apoyo y me dicen cosas como tú puedes lograrlo y eso.
She gets a lot of support, and they tell her that she can do it.
En mis clases, CalSafe siempre se ha preocupado.
The program CalSafe cares about her.
Y sobre todo me han ayudado en mi clase de inglés.
And more than anything, they help her with the English class.
Porque ahora soy la mejor de mi clase y lo sé hablar un poco mejor y lo comprendo.
Right now, she's the best student in her class and understands better.
Y quiero decir que CalSafe es necesario para todos los jóvenes.
And she wants to say that CalSafe is a good program for all the students.
Que desean algún día graduarse y darles un mejor futuro a sus hijos.
That wish to graduate and give a better future to their children.
Y CalSafe no es solamente un programa que ayuda a cuidar niños, sino que los educa.
It's not only to take care of their children, but also to educate them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Linda Oliveira, by Anna Karanko, followed by Sarah Jimenez.
Hi, my name's Linda Oliveira. I'm here in support of the CalSafe program. Please don't stop this program. CalSafe is not only a wonderful, warm, and safe environment for the children, but the teachers, such as BJ, Judy, and a lot of the other teachers, are also mentors to these young moms. They make sure the girls go to school and do their homework, and Judy and BJ are always ready and willing to do whatever it takes for these young moms. Help them stay in school and get an education that they need and truly deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. The speaking slip for the public comment are now closed. Anna Karenko, followed by Sarah Jimenez and Karen Prolinsky.
Hi, I'm Anna Karanko, and I was attending Santa Barbara High School, and I have my 4-month daughter, Destiny, and I was in the program CalSafe. I got dropped, and I was going to La Cuesta once a week and taking care of my daughter full-time the other days, and before I had my little girl, I didn't realize the importance of childcare, and now that I have my daughter, and I had her at a young age, I realize how important it is to me and many other teen moms. And like they were saying, CalSafe doesn't only take care of the kids, it helps grow them. I'm in class and I'm not wondering if my daughter's okay because I know she's okay. I'm focused more in school, my grades are better, and I know that she's okay. And they help me academically, and they were always pushing me to do good, and finally I'm doing good, and I had the strength I needed, and I get dropped. And we really need this program, and I really think I should consider not cutting it. And our parents also suffer. I mean, my mom, I see her stressed out a lot, and I'm sure a lot of other mothers do too. And my mom grew me and my brother by herself, and so now that I want help. I know I can't be as strong as her. I'm trying, and CalSafe really did help me, and I really need it. And hopefully you guys don't cut it.
Thank you very much. Soraya Jimenez? Followed by Karen Polinsky, followed by Joanne Keynes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Sarah Jimenez. I have a son named Jared. He's 10 months old. CalSafe has helped me through my 2 past years. They have been great helping me with my classes. They just don't take care of my baby. They're also great mentors. CalSafe have made me realize the importance of education. They always make sure that my grades are high and that my attendance are not bad. They are also giving my son an education by helping him speak out his words good and how to play with other children. They have been very supportive about breastfeeding. There's never been a time when I need to talk to them, and they have never said no. Thanks to CalSafe, I love school, I love being a mother, and I'm not a dropout. Thank you.
Karen Polensky, followed by Joanne Keynes, followed by Marcia Merrifield.
Hi, my name is Karen Polinsky. I teach at Goleta Valley Junior High. I've been there for about 8 years. Previously, I taught at Monroe Elementary and Peabody Elementary as well. I'm a little bit irreverent and tend to speak out. I hope I'm not offensive. I want to speak about the Read 180 program. And my experience today was an excellent analogy of how I feel the Read 180 program is being handled right now. I was thoroughly enjoying a professional development class with my colleagues, happily studying with Jonathan Lemaster again, when in walks Cynthia White at 2:30-ish to let us know that it's possible that there were problems with Read 180 and it's coming up at the board tonight, and let's talk about that quickly. So I thought, okay, I guess I need to change my plans and come to the board meeting tonight and do that. She said, well, we'll probably find out at about 7:30 what's going to happen. You'll get a phone call. So at 6 o'clock on my way driving home to tell my husband that plans had changed, I got a phone call saying, you probably need to come in now. So I do that. I change that. It's a perfect example of how Santa Barbara School District, how things seem to get handled. I've been through Breaking the Code. I've been through the Reading for Success, the SRA program. We seem to have a program now that is tops. You know, I love technology. I'm tweeting with all these educators across the country. They are all saying Read 180 is the program. So can we finally do the right thing and have a good, strong program instead of toying around over and over again with programs that work halfway? For me, the strongest part of this program is that it has...
Your time is up. Can you wrap it up?
Yeah, yes, the strongest part is that it offers students with a lot of frames of reference and visual material. We're talking about students that aren't served, that don't have information. We're offering them the information and then educating them.
Thank
So
you.
I'm sure other people have a lot more to say.
Karen Polensky, oh, nope, Joanne Keynes. That was Karen, okay. Followed by Marcia Merrifield, followed by Linda Caruso.
Good evening. I'm Joanne Keynes, principal of Lacumba Junior High, and I'm here this evening representing all four of us junior high principals, David Ortiz, John Becchio, and Veronica Rogers. And I'm here to speak in support of Read 180, and I'm going to let the teachers talk about the instructional part of it. I just want to talk about the financial part of it, because clearly we have a budget crisis in the Santa Barbara School District. So the question is, how do we pay for Read 180? Because it is a pricey program. So I'd like to just provide you with the monetary figures, because all of the money that's going to pay for Read 180 is coming out of categorical funding that is not eligible to be swept. There will be no general fund money. For example, the cost for the elementary district is $389,000, and the elementary district, will be receiving over $500,000 in American Reinvestment and Recovery dollars, so that will cover that expense. In the secondary district, the price tag is $834,000. The secondary district will receive a little over $500,000 in American Reinvestment and Recovery dollars. The ending balance in Title I is $235,000. The ending balance in EI-LEP is $153,000, and the ending balance in restricted lottery is another $200,000. All of this together, these categorical funds, more than pay for this program without any encroachment at all in the general fund. So on behalf of the junior high principals, and we probably represent over 100 years.
About 5 seconds.
Of educational experience, we unanimously support Read 180. Thank you.
Marcia Merrifield, by Linda Caruso, by Michael Vale.
Good evening. My name is Marcia Merrifield. I'm a teacher of English and English learners at La Colina Junior High. And I was also at the LeMaster training today. And as I sat there and learned to work with text, I thought, how many of our students cannot do this and struggle to do this? And also this evening, we saw our colleagues of 30-plus years in education. I'm 16 years in the district, and I'm excited. I'm excited about Read 180. I had the privilege of teaching Mr. Cabrero's 2 daughters. I would have done so much for them had I had this program. Also, for schools like La Colina, we do not get Title I money, yet we still have our English learners that come to us. And while we are low in numbers, we are just as needy as to what educational programs, educational advantages we can give them. Read 180 is a 2-tier approach. It offers almost a newcomer program built in, as well as the mainline or the Read 180 program for English learners. The costs are not hidden like you might see in other programs. Everything is out there with Read 180, and it's a one-time major purchase.
30 seconds.
Thank you. It offers 30,000 images of text and vocabulary for our English learners. It brings in reading and writing and spelling, and they have reading fluency and The computer program is a part. And one thing is, we start with something the kids know. The kids know computer systems. The kids know the game systems. And not that this is a game.
Can you wrap it up?
Yes, I will. But we're starting with something that they are confident in, and that is the computer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Linda Caruso, followed by Michael Vale, followed by Laura Baker.
Good evening, Dr. Sarvis, Ms. Sawaski, and board members. I'm a teacher at Santa Barbara High School. I've been there 13 years, and I've been working with the English learners and the ELD department chairs for the past 9 years. One thing that's unique about Read 180, apart from the other 5 programs that were approved by the state for standalones for struggling readers and/or English learners and special needs students, is that it is a program that's been in existence for 8 years, and it does have data. The other 5 programs are all new. They do not have data yet. The content and the criteria that they had to meet are all the same, so all the programs are sufficient in content and the state required criteria. I think that Read 180 has some significant differences, primarily 2, that make it different from a textbook-bound program. The things I see that the students struggle with and that we struggle with as educators in our classroom of 25 to 30 students is their lack of engagement, their lack of interest, particularly at the secondary level, the lack of rigor in programs that are built for intensive intervention because the grade level is so much lower, the lack of the capacity as a single teacher in a classroom to do significant differentiated instruction on a weekly basis, the need for reteaching, and the conflicting barrier that we have to keep moving at an accelerated pace, and the difficulty in developing significant and reliable frequent common assessments that give us data to inform our instruction and to help us collaborate around specific student needs. I believe that Read 180 meets these challenges better than the other 5 programs. In terms of the instructional delivery protocol,
10 seconds.
it is divided into 5 different areas and has different mediums to work with, not just the computer, but 4 other different mediums during the day. There is also a Scholastic Achievement Management data system which aggregates data for us.
Can you wrap it up?
Gives us individualized data on each student. I think that we won't be working with hope with this program. We'll have a substantial strategy to meet our students' needs and close the achievement gap. Thank you.
Michael Vale, followed by Laura Baker, followed by Norm Clevenger.
Good evening. I want to start by saying congratulations to Jackie Pruitt on 35 years of service to our district. And Jackie, I think, is just one of hundreds of talented teachers that we have in our school district, with great dedication to our students, incredible professional skills, and tonight, I'm not representing the teachers, but my professional opinion is that we have an opportunity to provide those teachers with tools to close the achievement gap in our district. As an elementary principal, I see too often students leave our early primary grades with reading skills that are still too weak to be successful as intermediate students, too weak to be successful as secondary students. The program Read 180 has been studied by a team of teachers within our district throughout the year in relationship to the adoption of a new RLA program. They've worked with the County Office of Education. They've identified Read 180 as an effective tool by which they can close the achievement gap for so many of our underrepresented students. I encourage you tonight, while we face dire straits economically, that we have an opportunity to make strategic investments that can concretely
20
put
seconds.
tools in the hands of our teachers to close the achievement gap.
Laura Baker, followed by Norm Clevenger, followed by Silvina Pereira.
Good evening. Thank you. My name's Laura Baker. Excuse me. I have been a teacher in the district since 1991. So I'll be stepping into my 18th year of teaching with the district, and prior to that I was instructional aide since 1984, so I've been in the district for 24 years. I've seen that pendulum swing many times of what works and what doesn't work and what works again, go back and forth so many times looking at language arts adoptions. And the one thing that I do want to make sure we look at and address is, there's been a very learned committee that has studied all these different options that we had in front of us, looking at what the state of California has approved, has adopted or has approved for adoptions. And the committee has very carefully chosen Read 180 as their top choice. And I think it's really important to say, years ago when I first started this district, Santa Barbara School District was a very well-achieving school district. And we are no longer a well-achieving school district, as we've seen. I mean, the numbers have shown that. It's time to stop the same old that we've had for the last several iterations of these adoptions. Read 180 is thinking out of the box. It takes us off of that same track of the pendulum that we've been on. And as a teacher, I want to show you, or make sure you all understand that Read 180, everybody talks about how, it's just a computer program. It takes the teacher out of the mix. It doesn't. That's one component. A Read 180 day, a time block of my students would be, I start with my students as a whole group and do a whole group lesson, setting them up for their skills.
24 seconds.
Thank you. And information they're going to need. Then we break up into what's called a wheel, and that breaks the students down into small groups. And during that small group time, one of their time periods is on the computer. The other time is with me, where I can specialize my instruction for that group. The other time is working maybe with an instructional aide on individual work that they need to get done. And at the end of the time period, they come back to whole group. There is a lot of teaching going on in that program. It's not just a computer program. So that's really important. I just want you to be sure that you look at the fact that we cannot continue, cannot continue to do the same old thing, obviously. And I think it's time for us to do the right thing. The teachers are willing to step out of the box and get out of their comfort zone.
Thank you.
We want you to do the same thing.
Thank you. Norm Clevenger, followed by Silvina Pereira, followed by Lane Wheeler.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board. I have a couple of English department chairs that had some things that we wanted me to say tonight, but I won't for two reasons. One, because you've already heard what the teachers think about this, and the other because the print was really too small for me to read. So I'm just going to speak from my own experience. I was a principal at Santa Ynez High School 6 years ago when we adopted Read 180 as a fairly new program. We had a number of kids coming to us at risk, well below reading level and in danger of not graduating. We adopted the program, ran 2 labs, 7 sections of it. Shortly thereafter, the elementary schools got interested in it and they adopted the program. And lo and behold, when I left a year ago, we only needed 3 sections of it because they were using it in the elementary and 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So it is a very dynamic program. And as you just heard, it's much more than just the computers, but it's engaging. You know, the biggest, highest qualities of this program is the kids want to be there, they're engaged, the material is at teenage level, even if the reading levels vary. And this is just the type of thing that we need for this at-risk group of kids. If we look at our recent track record, it's pretty stagnant, it's pretty level. And these kids need a boost in the arm, and this is just the way to do it. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Silvina, followed by Lane Wheeler.
Good evening, members of the board, and thank you for having me. I don't come with the PowerPoints. My name is Silvina Pereira. I'm a counselor from Dos Pueblos High School. For 14 years now, I've been a counselor. But prior to that, I've been, for my entire life, still consider myself an English language learner. I came to this country at a very young age. And at a very young age, someone taught me how to read. And it is because of that that today I can speak to you in Spanish and I can read to you, speak to you in English. Because of that, I was able to take honors or advanced level courses throughout both my junior high school and my high school career. Because of the fact that I learned to read, I was able to go on to UCSB. Because of the fact I learned to read, I went on to get a credential and today be a school counselor to encourage and to help bridge the achievement gap that does sorely exist, and you know this. I recently, 2 weeks ago, looked at some data of our students that are not achieving to be able to enter in their first year of college level English. I was one of those at UCSB. Yes, I learned to read, but a program like this will help, and I consider this a stimulus package for our students. This is what we desperately need. And listening to our colleagues from the different junior high schools and high schools and how they're behind the program, I ask you to support the need for students. The need for students to learn, just like myself, to be able to be given that, what they need to be challenged then at the high school level and throughout their educational career so we can have them find success. I ask you as an English language learner and as a school counselor, thank you.
Thank you. Lane Wheeler.
Hello, Lane Wheeler, Santa Barbara Teachers Association. Two considerations that I'd like you to weigh in as you make these weighty decisions this evening. In regards to the READ 180, there's approximately $1.2 million, $1.3 million that's being identified out of the recovery funds from the federal government. I have no problem with the program. I know that teachers have been involved in the selection process, but when we have over 200 employees from the certificated unit being laid off or being RIFed, and certainly the impact of that is a strident and very damaging one to our community as a whole and to our school system individually. I would simply say that as you make choices on curriculum, do it within the budget that we have and not using a one-time fix to get into this. If we can't afford it, then we have to put it off until we can. We are looking at a Band-Aid here. It may be a very needed and a very important program. Great, do it within the budget that we have, but this is certainly outside of that budget in a time when we are in that rainy day scenario. I feel like Noah gathering up the animals right now on the ark. So please consider that. Also, the EduSoft account manager position, once again, there's an identification of a very substantial amount of money for a position that doesn't even have any evaluation as part of the component. I'm not sure how this
Can you wrap it up?
person would be identified as doing a good job or not. So if you could consider that, I'd appreciate it also. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. On to item C4, which is acceptance of donations. Oh, wait. Did either one of you, Dr. Sarvis or Ms. Zawaski, want to comment very briefly on, we did
Well,
have a number of speakers on CalSafe in
Yeah,
particular.
I think we should give the board an explanation of what's happening with CalSafe so that you're aware of that.
Okay, Eric Smith, you can chime in if you'd like. My understanding, and I've been meeting, of course, with child development coordinators, Susan Ashlock and Jenny Martinez. They've known about this for a while, and of course have not been happy and have been trying every which way to be able to keep the services. This is a Tier 3 program, and I know you're aware of the way the state has divided the different funding grants and sources that come from the state. And Tier 3 is the one that was already deficit 15% this last spring. We're walking into a new year with a 4-point-something, almost 5%. So right there off the top, it's a 20% deficit to that program, which isn't a large amount of money anyway to the program. And then being a Tier 3 category funding source, it's again reduced to a 30% by our district, as all of those programs are. In looking at what was left, it's not cut completely, of course. We've got the 70% of what was left after being cut from the state. That was the decision to house that program at one site. So that's what we're hearing about the San Marcos, and that's, I mean, nobody wants to do that. That has been the solution that the coordinators have come up with. Along with that, Kathy Abney, you heard one of the students talking about coming to La Cuesta. We started just with, it was kind of a Band-Aid at this end of the school year, trying to service some of those students who could not fit into the programs. And that's been going on for a while. Coming this next year, Kathy has planned a program that, under the independent study umbrella, would house many more of the teens in a much more comprehensive kind of program than they have now. So we're trying to make up for this.
All right, well, that actually sounds like something that we need to bring as a conference item for further discussion shortly. Thank you. Now on to item C4, acceptance of donations.
I'd like to move to accept with appreciation.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes 4-0. And then on to item D, the consent agenda. Any items to pull? First of all, I'm going to start with pulling D2. And Mr. Het-Jan has asked that we pull D18 as well. Any other items, board members?
I'd like to pull D15.
I'd like to pull D6, D7, D9.
D6, D7, and D9.
Just 15.
Just D15. All right, with that,
Excuse
is there a
me.
motion?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
If you're pulling D15, would you also please pull D16, because we don't want to approve 16 without 15?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Move to approve the remainder of the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That passes 4-0, and we will come back to the remaining items when we get to G, which will be at 10:10 at the latest. We are now at our action agenda, item E1, which is the approval of issuance of 1,522 diplomas to end-of-year high school graduates. Board members.
And Robin Swaski, our Associate Superintendent, will present this. E1.
Okay, yes, and Dr. Sarvis did speak about the graduates a while ago, and you can see that we have 1,522 graduates. This is a thing we do every year, and we ask for your approval of the actual issuance of the diplomas for these graduates.
I'd like to move to approve with great excitement and appreciation for these students' hard work.
I'll second that, and also just say as a new board member how much I really enjoyed going to graduations and to all the award ceremonies. It was really a testimony to a lot of the good things we do.
Yeah, it's actually one of the funnest parts of the job.
I called
yes,
it
Mr.
joyous, and because watching those junior high students come across almost like a deer in headlights, and then to watch the seniors graduate and the total elation that it's over. It was classic. It was classic. I just loved it. Absolutely loved it.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Sorry, I'm going to keep saying 4-0 since Dr. Noel is not here. Item E2, approval of variable term waiver for adaptive physical education teacher.
And Robin Swaski will present this as well.
Yes, I'm going to stand in for Dr. Robertson. This often happens when we cannot find a substitute teacher that has the appropriate credential, and this year unfortunately one of our adaptive PE instructors suffered some unexpected health issues, and we have been able to find a PE teacher, Brian Sharp, that will be able to work with that, and we need to have your approval of the variable term waiver for adaptive PE teacher, Brian Sharp.
Board members, is there a motion? Yes.
I had just a quick question, and that is, what is the criteria by which Brian Sharp is identified as being able to serve the needs of the adaptive PE students?
From what I know, he has been working in the classroom with this teacher, and he's been shadowing the teacher and working with him, and that was he's worked previously as special education instructor, structural assistant, shadowed in the classroom numerous times. He's enrolling in an adaptive PE credential program.
But he hasn't actually started it?
He has.
Or has he?
Well, until you approve his waiver to be there, we can't have him, we can't have him start officially, so it would be for the following
No, I
year.
mean the credentialing program.
Oh, he has, the credentialing program hasn't started yet, so
Yeah.
he's in there as soon as he possibly can.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Is there a motion?
I move to approve the variable term waiver for adaptive physical education teacher.
I'll second it.
Any other questions? All those in favor? Passes 4-0. On to item E3, board action on student expulsion case number 0809-64.
In case 0809-64, I move that, to uphold the
It's a stipulated agreement.
yeah, to accept the stipulated agreement for a 1-year expulsion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It carries 4-0. And we're now moving on to the conference agenda. This item was due to start at 7:50. It's already after 8:10. It's scheduled for 80 minutes, but I want to make board members aware that the next item is F2, the review of the board policy and AR 5116.1, which I do expect that we will have public comment on, so I will start that at 9:25 at the latest.
At this moment, there's just one public comment.
For F2? That's fine. But I will start that on time. So we will have to keep that in mind as we ask questions about item F1 and as we take public comment on item F1. So with that, it's the update on state education funding reduction proposals and consideration of additional district reductions for the 09-10 school year.
Well, as you know, these are particularly difficult financial times. The board made $4 million in cuts just 1 year ago, made $3 million in cuts just 1 month ago, and is now faced with making even more cuts. Eric Smith, our deputy superintendent, will give us a little background to that, will bring us up to speed on what's happening at the state level, what we think we can anticipate, and will set the stage for the board discussion of making further cuts. Eric?
Thank you, Dr. Sarvis. As the board knows, in a typical year, our first milestone in the development of the budget is the governor's proposed budget in January, but this year has been anything but typical. We started with a 17th-month budget adopted February 17th. That budget was predicated on the passage of 5 measures that were on the May 19th special election. As you know, all of those measures failed, plummeting the state into a deeper recession. Right now, estimates are that the state's deficit is looming around $25 billion. So if we use our last jolly time together on April 28th as a starting point, and we look at the $3 million in budget cuts the board adopted there as a starting point, it's useful to see what transpired since then. Well, predicated on the failure of the May 19th measures, the governor had already released a pre-May revision to the budget, which basically translated to about another $2 million in revenue loss in the secondary district and about another $300,000 in revenue loss on the revenue limit in the elementary district. The elementary district revenue loss has basically been curtailed to a great extent by the fact that the deficit on the revenue limit is driving the elementary district into basic aid status and basically has provided a soft landing to its free fall. And we expect that to happen in fiscal year 9-10. However, the $2 million in lost revenue is real, and what we thought was a worst-case scenario got even worse on May 29th when the governor basically proposed another round of mid-year cuts that would go into next year, which translated into another $1 million of lost revenue for the secondary district. And this was primarily due to the fact that the governor, I think on a fiscal policy basis, made the right decision, which is not to issue a revenue anticipation warrant to plug a hole just to have to pay it back in the following year. However, the real and lasting effects to school districts is more cuts at the local level. So looking at a $3 million loss in unrestricted revenue in the secondary district between April 28th and now, we thought that's as bad as it was going to get.
Mr. Smith, 1 second. Public comment on this issue is closed.
Then we discovered some irregularities in ADA reporting in the secondary district. We performed our own internal audit of those basically irregularities, corrected them, and basically that will amount to about another $500,000 in lost revenue to us in the secondary district. I will point out that we identified those irregularities and corrected them in advance of our independent auditors identifying it, which is good, because if those practices were deemed to have existed in the prior year, they could have went back 1 year and made us to have what's called a question cost finding. So in any event, looking at the totality of revenue loss, it's rather overwhelming. And to put this in perspective, Meg and I were looking at how much revenue loss we lost since July 1 until June 30th or going into next year. $5 million in the secondary district, $2.3 million in the elementary district. So $7.3 million in state revenue in 12 months. And that's not including categoricals. So framing it in that context, as the board's well aware, we need to make some additional expenditure reductions. We're constrained both by time, because we have a constitutional obligation to adopt a budget by June 30th, and basically by organizational capacity to look at every single alternative that we'd like to look at. Therefore, most of what's been put forward is big chunks. You know, we have some ideas about some things that need to be refined. We set a target of $1 million in the secondary district and roughly about $500,000 in the elementary district. We'd like to achieve those prior to June 30th. And I would imagine that not only we have suggestions, but probably the board has some suggestions relative to other things you want us to look at. So the other thing that we included is some potential things that we could look at, not only for 9-10, but for 10-11. The most significant issue is because the deficit is so significant, now closing up to close to 18% on the revenue limit, the secondary district will have its feet into basic aid in fiscal year 10-11, I believe. Is it 10-11, Meg? Secondary? Yeah, just barely. So that begs the question of inter-district transfers there and what we will do in regard to that issue. 11-12. I'm sorry, 11-12, barely into 11-12. So we put together mostly holdover items from the last deliberation. As you know, in some cases, you've already utilized the majority of savings. So you see, like, one of the issues here is potentially raising K-3 class size, but you can see that the amount of savings is fairly minimal because the way that's structured with the revenue penalties, there's actually a disincentive to increase size. One of the things we're not sure about is that the governor has not introduced his trailer bill relative to his proposals. We are hearing rumors that there could be unlimited, or I won't say unlimited, more flexibility, especially with regard to K-3 CSR, EIA, and some other programs. Obviously, if that was the case, and basically we thought there was Democratic support to basically get that through the legislature, this whole issue of raising class size in K-3, you'd see much more bang for the buck because your revenue wouldn't be watered down in the equation. On the second item, which was the groundskeepers items, we have an idea about looking how to reorganize grounds, and I think we're going to bring that back on the 16th. That was basically the motivation for Dave to pull that item on D18, which is basically our agreement with the city. We think we can look at how these two interact and possibly save a job and do it more effectively, and we'll have a reorganization proposal that we'd bring back on the 16th. Suspend deferred maintenance transfer. To me, it seems like a no-brainer. It's a lot of money. We can do it. Obviously, our Director of Fiscal Services and Director of Facilities did a reconciliation. We can make that work. I don't know for how many years, if it's just 1 year or more than 1 year. You know, I hate stopgap measures, but our back's up against the wall, and so we'll look at that. Probably not palatable to many, increasing 9th grade class size to the maximums. It's a significant amount of dollars. And then also I was asked to look at putting the ASB issue back on the agenda. I have, the more research I've done, both on ASB, on the student parking, and also on the events parking, I think there's some logistical obstacles that will make it very difficult to implement by fall. So what I'd like to do is basically look at, I have an idea. I would ask the board for a moratorium of 1 year on that, and the way I propose to backfill that is that we actually get redevelopment revenue through the Isla Vista and Goleta redevelopment agencies, and that money is restricted for deferred maintenance and/or educational facilities. By looking at that, I believe we can send some of that money over to deferred maintenance. Deferred maintenance had made the prior contributions into the deferred maintenance fund were unrestricted, so we can actually bring $100,000 back, and that would offset those expenditure reductions, at least for 1 year, while we actually look at this and study it more. One of the things I'm concerned about, especially with regard to the student parking issues, is ASB charges 2 of those student bodies for parking already. So I'm looking at the ability to pay and whether there's the equity there. And I also want to do some more research on the events parking and what the security impacts might be. So I just thought, since there's some logistical issues, we can actually put a Band-Aid on it for a year. Don't take it off the table, but just suspend it for a year while we study it, and have a way through craftsmanship to basically backfill that expenditure reduction.
One question on that.
Yes.
In your last sentence, you say it is not appropriate to relook. Did you really mean it is now appropriate to look, even though you're going to?
Now,
Yeah.
yeah, now. That's correct.
Although not might be better.
Yeah, and actually, there was a question regarding the legality of charging ASB, bookkeepers for those, and there's a legal opinion attached in case anybody needs that clarified. But
And can I just ask for clarification on that? When you say a moratorium on that, do you mean on the 50%? Because we already passed the 25%.
yeah, I mean on the 25%.
You meant-
The ASB item was requested to be put back on the agenda, and I think somehow it just got pushed, maybe an old version of the draft got put on there when it was 50. So I'm saying the 25%, the student parking and the events parking, I'd like to suspend that for a year and then bring it back. Hopefully, we can have a viable way to implement it, and we have a one-time Band-Aid to basically get us through, which I just explained in great detail.
Okay.
On that same issue, I
Yes.
would hope that that legal opinion would be looked at. I don't think it gives any conclusion. It just says it's ambiguous about the 3 signatures. And so I
Right.
think that in the year, that needs to be resolved.
Right, and I think depending on what comprehensive high school, I mean, they all have differences of opinion on this issue, and there's so many interdependencies, like this whole issue on the student parking. Some charge, some don't. So we've had a variety of different conversations, and it's just going to take some time to figure out how it's going to look.
Yeah, no,
Mrs.
I would say
Deacon?
it's reasonable to expect that implementing systems like that's going to take some time.
So then when we look at the following year, obviously, I think the inter-district transfers is something that needs to be looked at. Obviously, we brought back the elective issue at the junior high. Reducing psychologists was a goal that we did not meet in 8-9, and ostensibly the FCMAT study says we're overstaffed there. And then another thing we just started to look at that we couldn't implement this year is summer school that was supported by the hourly programs only. I'm not talking about program improvement schools that use Title I or have specialized funding, but when we started looking at how that's rolled out and what the cost differential is, given that the hourly programs have been deficited, that might be something we might want to look at going into 10-11. So that's kind of a broad overview of what I would call big chunks. And if I can provide any clarity, I'd be more than happy to.
Mr. Herron.
Just 2 or 3 things. At one point, you said under rescind inter-district transfers, 2010, 2011. Meg corrected and said 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
And the document says 2010, 2011.
Well, the issue is, and we'll probably put up a spreadsheet here, it's the interrelationship between when you rescind the interdistricts, you lose the associated staff, but there's also an impact on state aid because you're losing the students. But because we're in a declining enrollment pattern, there's a prior year guarantee. So where you should be basic aid in that year, when you rescind the interdistricts, you don't actually become basic aid until the following year. And if we put that up on the screen, you can see that.
Okay, I'm just saying, it says here, the secondary district will become basic aid in fiscal year 2010, 2011. Is that true or not true?
Not 10, 10, 11, 12.
Well, the document then that we're
Yeah.
reading is wrong.
That's correct. You can see we're almost there. But then, as I would say, this is dynamic. You know, we could be deficited another, 0.5%. We could be basic aid. So
Well,
I think one of the things that's important to note, too, is that our deficit right now and the revenue limit's close to 18%. This last round, where we lost another $1 million in the secondary district, there's some speculation we might not see that in adopted budget, but we're going to get hit with it as a mid-year cut. So we might as well just plan for it because it's going to happen sooner or later.
But I want to chime in on that because if we did revoke the inter-district transfers for 10-11, we would be into basic aid. If it's,
Yeah, come on up, Beg.
In 9-10, we will keep the inter-district transfers. If you decide that in 10-11 we accept no more inter-district transfers, we will have 346 kids approximately, or 300 kids that will go back to their schools. That's an estimate. However, we are funded, we have that prior year funding, so we get the ADA for the P2 of 09-10. So that's what keeps us out of basic aid that year. However, we will have the related expense, because we will lose 300 approximately children, so that equates to about $738,000, I believe.
Bring that up, Dave.
Can you slide it down, Dave?
So Kate,
Oh.
it seems counterintuitive, but that was my first grasp on it, but that's not the case because of
Gotcha.
the prior year guarantee.
You don't have the latest one. I sent you a newer one. That's okay, but the 300 equates to, you divide the 35 average attendance, the average size class, and it comes out to about 9 FTEs. And we use the 85,000 as a, total cost of a teacher, and it comes out to about $738,000 from loss of ADA, the FTEs. However, now in 11-12 is when we look at 10-11's P2, and that's what we do. That's what happens if we do not lose any, still keep the inter-district transfers. I give you two scenarios here. So this is with the 300 inter-district transfers, and you see that we are in basic aid status by 1.3 million. As we all know, that can change at any minute. Who knows what the state will do? However, here is with the 300 ADA out of it, and you can see we're 3.1 million in basic aid.
okay. Mr. Herron, any other, or Mrs. Scudero?
I just want to make sure, because this is always one of the areas that I find challenging. When you say with or without the 300, give or take, students in 2011, 2012, is that based on reducing the district in that year, or is it based on having reduced that number the prior year?
It's from the prior year, because we have that 1 year, prior year funding.
I want to make sure I'm asking the question clearly, because what I'm asking is, in order to see your projections, in order for those to accurately reflect what we're looking at, would we have to impose the elimination of inter-district transfers in 2010-11 in order to see that in 2011-12?
Actually, we would start to see it here.
Okay.
But this is a natural decrease. I wanted to give you two scenarios that this is 10-11's P2, which we always said we were going to go into basic aid in 11-12. However, we go into it naturally without releasing the inter-district transfers by 1.3 million. However, if we let them go as of 10-11, that would be the P2 for 10-11, P2 10-11.
So actually, when you go in is the same year. It's the magnitude.
It's the magnitude.
Mrs. Deacon?
and I think this is true, but that's with the understanding that we would eliminate all inter-district transfers as opposed to just, say, not accepting any more in 2010.
That's the 3.1 million
Right,
scenario.
right. So you could be somewhere between those two numbers if
Absolutely.
we phased it.
Mhm. And I guess, so I just want to follow up with that. These are the numbers, that's how far you'd be into basic aid. But the savings number that you have here is about the loss of certificated staff, and that would take place in 10-11 if
That's
we did
That's
not.
correct.
So it would still be revenue limit, but by not having those transfers, we would save $850,000. Well, that
About
was the old
700.
number, you know,
Or-
it's
yeah.
changed. But, okay.
Some amount in that range.
Mr. Herron.
I would think as we're looking at these, if past votes are typical, you might want to consider not including the 11th grade inter-district transfers, to take them out and not have them graduate with their class might cause some unrest.
And that's why we're bringing this up
Sure.
now.
I
In
think,
fact, go ahead.
yeah, one of our thoughts was, is given what we see on the horizon, depending on what the board wants to do, we just thought more advance notice is better, you know, given what we did with the elementary. So we're kind of just putting it out there.
I'd like to comment on this as well. You know, that we're bringing these projections back to you now just about every 3 months. And with the passage of time, each of these, we gain more certainty on each of these numbers, whether it's COLA or deficit or whether it's actual property tax income. So we expect that after the passage of an actual state budget that gives us more assurance about the numbers, that this fall we will bring this back to you again, and we'll be a little closer to what might actually happen. I agree we should consider different scenarios in that, and the most important thing is that we make that decision early enough about inter-district transfers so that we give our parents heads up and they have plenty of advance warning about it.
Any other questions at this point? Do we want to go ahead and take public comment on this and then come back for board discussion in greater detail? Yes, how many speakers do we have? Yes, Mrs. Cordero.
Eric, you indicated that these are all, well, the list that we have are all pretty much carryovers from our previous versions of various lists. Is that
I would say
correct?
about 90%.
Okay. Given, where we are now and the fact that we are now looking at cutting it in even more painful ways, have we, and maybe this is not a question for you, this might be a question for Robin, for Ms. Waske and Dr. Sarvis, that have we looked at adding any additional items to this list that we hadn't put in some of the previous lists?
That was really the purpose of tonight's meeting. It was to bring back items that we have discussed before. You know, we started this whole process back in January. We missed the boat on some potential cuts. For example, we noticed a couple of administrators at the end of February. We didn't notice other administrators. We noticed a number of certificated staff. And as we move forward with this, certain things are possible, other things aren't. But really the question is, board, do you have other items you would like to have us take a look at and pencil out so that by next Tuesday, we're able to make decisions about these?
Mrs. Deacon.
I'm sorry, I just have one more quick question. Mr. Smith, when you describe the fiscal impact, we talk about the ongoing loss of 3.5 million to secondary and the $500,000 to elementary, but we're only looking at $1 million at secondary and $500,000 at elementary. Is the difference there? Are we talking about reserves?
Well, I mean, here's the issue. I mean, you can look at it two ways. I would look at it as the structural deficit, and I know you guys have heard the speech, the ongoing imbalance between revenues and expenditures. We're pushing a portion of the structural deficit in the secondary district into the next year, okay? So that's one issue. In the elementary district, we are, you know, getting very close to basic aid status, so it gives us a little bit more latitude. I will tell you that we need to make some cuts there because we were just penciling out the budget right now, and we're just shy of making the 3% if we break out the elementary and the secondary apart from each other, because most of our reserves have been accumulated in the secondary district. The other issue that's not transparent here is that the way the federal stimulus dollars work is that we have to account for them in a restricted resource. And when I explain this, you're going to say, oh, that's the federal government. We receipted them this year, but we can't spend them until next year. And if you look at the variety of things we could spend those dollars on after we engage our stakeholders, you know, for all intents and purposes, they're unrestricted, but they're making us account for them in a restricted resource. So what I'm telling you is that you're not going to see them in our, I guess, we will not see them in our unaudited actuals, or we will see them, Meg?
Is that right? There we go. We moved them from the unrestricted side.
With a reverse contribution.
With a reverse contribution to help out our fund balance in the elementary, and we're still short $150,000. So we moved 1.1 million from the restricted side of the budget to the unrestricted side of the budget to help that 3%, and we still didn't make it in the adopted budget. So we need some cuts there, but that's how they will be falling into fund balance in the unaudited actuals.
So what we're saying, if you want the elementary to stand alone, a couple $100,000 worth of cuts at a minimum need to be made there. Obviously, we have a strong reserve position combined, you know, excluding the federal stimulus dollars. You know, we're close to 7%. We'll see how much, you know, obviously we're losing money too, though. So our hope is that the federal stimulus dollars will offset most of the revenue loss, and we kind of maintain more or less a status quo relative to our reserve position. I had somebody ask me today, well, you know, don't you think having that size of a reserve is too much? Well, let me paint you an example. Our reserve is $3.7 million if we're at the 3%. How much money have we lost in 3 months? So I would prefer to stay around 6 or 7% if all possible.
Okay, board members, we're going to go to public comment at this point.
We have 4 speakers on the ASB issue. Since it's been delayed for a year, do you still want to spend your time telling us that we shouldn't be doing it?
We'd like to do one.
Thank you.
All right.
Ellie Iverson?
Then we have, 7 other speakers. Yeah. We're going to restrict you to 2 minutes so that board members have an opportunity to actually speak about this before we have to. All right. So 2 minutes. Thank you.
All right. Once again, my name is Ellie Iverson, and I'm the ASB Vice President for Santa Barbara High School, speaking on behalf of all 3 public high schools in Santa Barbara. On behalf of all 3 public high schools, I would like to express our gratitude for your decision regarding the 1-year moratorium. And as we've discussed the financial burdens all 3 schools currently carry, and we've agreed that we are unable to afford this additional cost. We will anxiously be awaiting the vote and watching the progress of this fiscal solvency plan. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all for being involved. Deborah Umansky, followed by Christina Aguirre-Kolb, followed by Lane Wheeler.
Is the first speaker here? Okay.
Hello. I'm a school psychologist and parent of 2 San Marcos graduates. Several months ago, the board voted in a plan for a new administrative structure in special education with new leadership at the district office. The hope is to find people with the best expertise the district can afford to restructure the special education department so that it functions more effectively. The district is in the process of finding new leadership. In light of this, it seems premature for the board to make special education financial and staffing decisions for the 2010-2011 school year without the input of the special education experts the district seeks to hire. Please table the special education decisions about the year after next until those people are on board and have had time to develop a plan for special education. Trust the plan that you yourselves made a commitment to and give the new special education administrative plan an opportunity to work. Thank you.
Christina, followed by Lane Wheeler, followed by Lisa Fell.
Hi, good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of reducing school psychologists from 17 to 12 FTEs for the fiscal year of 2010 to 2011, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Understandably, the board is in a stressful situation and needs to adopt a budget soon. The recommendation for this proposal to cut 5 full-time psychologists will be a false savings. Instead of reducing costs, these cuts will actually increase overall costs to the school district over the next few years due to the higher workload and reduced services. This opens the door to compliance lawsuits and subsequent budget drain. I forgot to mention, I made sure that each of you received a copy of my PowerPoint so you could follow along as I'm speaking. I'm on slide 4. When there's a systematic workload increase, our maintenance of these cases is significantly impacted, allowing parents easy access to file complaints with this district, which historically results in inadequate service to students and costly settlements. We are all familiar with the excess of some settlements and can bring the ensuing damage to the district budget, for instance, your item B2 for today's agenda. But let's remember, it's not about the money. It's also about the students. Let's recognize that school psychologists' work spans the students' emotional, mental, and learning difficulty needs in our schools. Ironically, during the 07-08 school year, I was working under the school psychologist ratio that's being proposed to this board, and I worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week, just to get the bare minimum done. The students' parents and I painfully suffered from my overload of work. And this year, by working at Ratio, I was able to be in compliance, fulfill all my duties, and support the students with severe social disabilities more intensely, as well as assist the other students brought to my office due to T and Jesucita fires, as well as other crises. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lane Wheeler, Santa Barbara Teachers Association. Because I see several psychologists in the audience, I'm going to keep my comments to the need to maintain the current ratio for our psychologists to a very short summary, and that would be that we need to continue maintaining the current ratios and not cut. More specifically, in terms of the budget considerations, having attended all these meetings, this is the same list that we've seen in the past. And while it may be an appropriate starting point, it's not by any stretch of the imagination, a complete view of what we have going. In a board brief that was released 2 weeks ago, there was a piece put out that showed the administrative rate of employees in Santa Barbara School District has remained fairly constant over the last 7 years. However, in that same 7-year period, over 1,000 students have left the district and over 100 staff have left the district. And this year, there's a FCMAT proposal that it would actually increase the administrative number of administrators in our district. That is, in fact, an increase in our administrative staff over the last 7 years, when the last rounds of cuts have all happened on staff SPACs, whether it be classified or certificated. Certificated has taken the heavy load here. I'm encouraging you to look very strongly at our current administration ratios and see if those can be brought to this conversation for consideration of reduction in force, just like teachers and psychologists and speech and language people and our adaptive PE people have been cut. We have a very tragic situation on our hands, and it won't be fixed by continuing to have a very heavy administrative staff and cutting teachers. We also have the bailout money that's coming, and I appreciate so much what Mr. Smith has been able to bring to our district in terms of physical stability, but I will also encourage you to remember that money is used to stop job losses, and this is a time to use that money in that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lisa Fell, followed by Becky Norton, followed by David Holmes.
Hi, I'm Lisa Fell, and I'm the new PTO president of Washington School. I'm speaking on behalf of the parents and teachers of Washington School. I know that because of the budget cuts, you'll need to eliminate many teachers in the elementary school district, and you've given them all pink slips, for many of whom will receive these eliminations. These pink slips have affected half of our school. Half of the teachers at our school have received pink slips. So it's clear to see the impact, the huge impact that will have on our school if they all are eliminated. So I ask that the district consider spreading out the elimination of teachers over all the schools so that the impact on any one school will be reduced. Thank you.
Becky Norton, followed by David Holmes, followed by Cheryl Long.
Good evening. My name is Becky Norton, and I am a school psychologist assigned to McKinley Elementary and the Homeschool Santa Barbara program. And I'm here to come to my own defense and the defense of the other psychologists in the district for the potential cuts. I want to talk a little bit more about the ratio issue. The ratio issue the logic of that is a little bit flawed, in my opinion. It's kind of like comparing apples and oranges. If we don't really know what duties are assigned to people in other parts of the state or in other districts. For instance, in our district, psychologists are responsible for counseling. It takes up to 30 or 40% of our time. In other districts, counseling is handled by county mental health, okay? Psychologist duties are reduced to the legally required elements in terms of assessment and identification of students with disabilities. So that is a very time-intensive part of what we do. I'd also like to remind you that just because, the NASP, the National Association of School Psychologists, recommends a ratio of 1 to 1,000. There's research behind that. There's reasoning, there's science behind that ratio, that recommended ratio. And in the statement, it says that there are only 5 states that achieve that ratio. Well, I'd like to say that just because it's not done doesn't mean it's right. But we shouldn't be emulating that as a district. We should be doing what's right for students. Let's see. A lot of what we do is behind the scenes by nature. We do testing, we do counseling, so people aren't aware of the incredible number of things and sensitive issues that we handle. We deal with the most fragile students in the district on a regular basis. If you do this, it's going to move us into a reactive rather than a preventive mode.
A few more seconds.
Thank you. So I would like to just please ask you to do what's right for students and keep the recommended 1 to 1,000 ratio. Thank you.
David Holmes, followed by Cheryl Long.
Good evening. I'm David Holmes, performing arts at San Marcos High School. I just celebrated my 25th year in this district, and I'm looking at, again, more and more cuts taking place in the electives area. That's where I'm finding my career. The loss of teachers with each of these cuts is really significant. You know that. The point I'd like to have you really weigh very heavily is how important that teacher is to the success of a program. A drama program isn't something that anyone can walk in and do. Vocal music, same thing. Band, same thing. The strength of the program is only there because of the strength of the teacher. So the cuts that you're working on now seem heavily weighted on reduction of FTEs. And that's easy to say, FTEs, it doesn't have a name or an address. What I worry about, and I don't know if there's any, this has any foundation at all, but I worry that this district is going to, in a way, emulate what's happening in higher education, where
30
there's
seconds.
a revolving door, and more teachers are being hired on temporary contracts. And there's no future for these teachers. I've built my entire career here in this district. I was able to buy a home. My daughter graduated Thursday. She's off to the University of Oregon. I just really fear for my colleagues and those new teachers who have no future in this district. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl Long?
Mr. Clevenger, is she?
I think she was going to speak to the ASB.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Clevenger. All right, board members, we have about a little less than 20 minutes, so I'd ask that we each be respectful of each other's time, and so that we all have a chance to get our questions and comments in.
I have a couple questions first.
Yes, Mr. Herron.
Under the 7.4 certificated full-time equivalents in junior high electives, you say the board may consider, and I think you're giving like 3 options, and then it says saving $629,000, and I'm not sure what attributes to the 629 or what the other options might end up saving. Do we have any numbers?
No, actually, the 629 pertains to the 7.4, so we'd have to cost that out. You're looking on page 5.
Okay, so like the board may consider, I guess keeping it the same as it is, and you'd save nothing, dropping it to 4, and we would save something. And if we eliminate everything, that would get to 629.
The 7.4, correct.
So I'd like to know what that number is on the,
Okay, on the other
4.
2.
And I just want to jump in here because I want to be really clear. We are taking action on items for 0910 next Tuesday, the 16th. We will not be taking action on any of these items on the proposed, on the 1011 expenditure reduction list. We're getting actually a tremendous heads up on this.
Right.
But these items will not be something that we take action on at least until the fall, I would say, perhaps on the interdistrict transfers, and maybe not until next spring for the other items.
That's correct.
Okay, the other question on that is, I will need an explanation of how this doesn't go against Proposition 8, Measure H.
Parcel tax. Right.
Yeah, the parcel tax. This one specifically is Measure H, and how we can not, how are we supplanting or not? And
That's
I would
that's
need
a
an
valid
explanation on
point.
that.
Sure.
And then on the reduced school psychologist, it implies that a ratio of 1,000 to 1 is recommended, but we don't have what it would take from us to get to 1,000 to 1. If we got rid of, that's not good. If we did the 5, what would that ratio take us to? And if we did the 5, is the $425,000 savings, that's like $80,000 a psychologist, which doesn't seem like a lot. Is that a fully loaded 425, or are there more savings above that?
I didn't think we had the 10 extra days, so we just used the average total teacher comp.
Okay. Those are my questions on that. I
On the
have a
10-11.
list of suggestions too.
All right, you want to go ahead and jump in with your list of? You can start.
And again, these aren't meant for discussion necessarily, and a lot of people may not like them, so I'm just going to toss them out.
These are for all 0910.
These are
yes.
910.
Well, I don't know.
As
well,
much as you can for 0910.
No, again, I'm going to toss them out. You put them where they go, because I'm not alert enough to, I've been looking into this concept of community service, and for people who know me, community service is very, very important. So I don't want any misunderstandings on that. But in a little bit of survey I've done, we have about 1.5 employees full-time, about 1.5 FTEs keeping track of all these hours. And so I have two questions. Why are we keeping track over 60 if that's required for graduation? And two, I guess even where does that, why is 60 hours required for graduation? What role does that play? Two, it's been suggested by, I think, staff at San Marcos that we give consideration to shortening the school year and eliminating 1, 2, or 3 professional development days, and do somehow professional development some other way. But that would, I'd like to know the numbers. If we eliminated professional development 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, what is the savings for that? If we can get, and a lot of these are union required or union discussions, but I think this is a day and age where we're going to have to talk with the unions about some of these things. Third area is legal. I don't know how you have a budget on legal, but if you base it upon last year or the past 12 months, your budget would be very high. But we're going to be hiring, hopefully, a new special ed, and I'm talking about legal for special ed. I mean, can we save any money by not paying attorneys? And I don't know how you do that, but I presume if we're going to have this new group of people leading this, if we don't reduce it legal, then something's wrong. The other is, we may have to take a hard look at the new special ed org chart. I mean, can we afford 5 new leaders in that? I think we need it. FCMEC says we need it, but we may not afford it. So we may have to look at that and say, can we do something different? An idea that I got when I was back in Connecticut was, can we use any of the, because this happened to my, one of my wife's nephew or cousins, can we use any of the stimulus money to give golden handshakes to long-term teachers and encourage some long-term teachers to retire in order to open up more room for teachers to stay with us? And the stimulus money is one time, and if you're going to create jobs, that might be a way to create jobs without, and use the stimulus money for a one-time thing. We don't want to use stimulus money for a long-term program. And then I guess my final thing is we have to look at a reduction in salaries. And again, this is a union issue, but I don't know if it's a reduction of salaries across the board. I don't know if it's a reduction in salaries to all of administrative people. I don't know if it's a reduction in salaries to the senior administration people in this building. But I would like some numbers on, what is a 1% reduction. We can then determine from that number, and in several categories, we can then determine what we would need to do to save some substantial dollars in reductions in salaries. And I think a lot of teachers might say it's better to lose a little bit and save some jobs than it is to cut off more jobs. Those are just a list of things I've been thinking about.
Thank you. Other board members? Mrs. Deacon.
Thank you, Mr. Herron, and I have some thoughts on some of those ideas as well, but I think I'll just start with some of the ones that have been given to us and weigh in on my feelings on those. As much as I don't want to do this, I'm not sure that there's a way around moving to 25-to-1 at elementary. And I want to talk in a minute about how we're not going to just go after teachers, because this is teachers, but it is a savings. It is something that I think maybe we could live with, or I could live with. The suspended the secondary deferred maintenance transfer, thank you. We'll take that. 9th grade English, I'm not ready to go here on this one personally. We just got it down to 20. Now we're talking about moving it back to 35-to-1. These are teacher jobs I'd like to save. And I did have a quick question about math, because in the write-up it says we can still apply for funding in math, but aren't we using Measure H money for math?
That's correct, but the prerequisite, since it's a Tier 3 program, no longer applies. So it's kind of like K3 CSR, where you're not really bound by the original intent of the program, but you still get the state reimbursement.
Okay, all right. And I guess I'll just end by saying picking up on Mr. Herron's comment, that I think what's pretty absent here is any discussion about some cuts at the administrative side. And I know that maybe we haven't noticed people, but just doing some internet searches, you find that districts across the state, administrators are taking unpaid furloughs. And I think we need to share the pain. I mean, I think the community's looking for that. I think, the teachers are. I feel that, maybe these are things that we can rescind at some point, but some of these are voluntary, at other districts. And I think maybe we all need to step up, I can say the board could do something like that, but, and I'm certainly willing to do that. A 20% cut would be very little. Would be something like $40 or $80. For us. But at any rate, I just think that this is something that we're going to have to look at.
Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I'm going to echo some of the things that have already been said. My primary concern is the suggestion of moving 9th grade English from 25 to 1 to 35 to 1. I just really can't support that, but would be willing to consider other possibilities in terms of increasing at a smaller rate. I'm looking at other things. Some of these I would like to know how they pencil out if we didn't go the whole distance. If it in terms of how we can do this, because given our last round of expenditure reductions, we have, as I said earlier, we're cutting now in really painful ways. I think we are going to have to kind of piecemeal it together. There really aren't too many large ticket items that we're going to be able or that we're going to be willing to just sort of wholesale cut. So I think we are going to be looking at pieces here, pieces there, until it adds up. And so I'd like to look at how some of these, especially the 9th grade class size issue, pencil out with various stages. The other thing is that I'm concerned about is, I think, something that Ms. Deacon just commented on, and that is looking at what are any areas that we might be able to reduce within administration, within other costs that are not specifically targeting classroom instruction or affecting site instruction. Because obviously there are, I remember when I don't know what year it was. It was before I was on the board, a couple of years before I was on the board, that we made some really significant cuts in administration. And we've seen over the years that has some really serious impacts. We've had to live with the consequences of having made those cuts. And sometimes those consequences have been pretty significant. So I don't relish the idea of going back to that, because I think we've just been trying to dig ourselves out of that hole. And I have to say, I was on a committee that recommended making some of those cuts, and I think at the time they were correct to make, but they had some serious consequences. I think we might be in that position again now, where we're going to have to be willing to live with some maybe unintended consequences because of the depth of the cuts that we're having to make. But with that said, I think there are some ways that we could build into it, many of these, whether it's the class size reduction, the reduction of elective FTEs, psychologist FTEs, whichever we do, there might be some way to build into those a sort of a sunset clause that, now, granted, I might be being overly optimistic, but that might say, should the budget ever get to, X point, those will be reinstated without having to sort of go back through the whole discussion, that they're sort of automatically get returned to current levels if we ever get to a point where the budget can maintain that. So that's actually one of the things I really want us to think about, is how we might write in some language that would make it so that counselors, psychologists, electives, et cetera, don't have to come back and fight their case again in order to get back to where we are now. So that's probably it for me at this point.
Okay. For myself, I think what you're talking about with sort of the cuts, maybe sunsetting if money comes back in, I do think it's important that while we have to make decisions next week so that we have a budget that's presented to the county and then onto the state, it's always a dynamic and fluid document, so that it could be that certain items will come up that are better choices even a week later. And we can always go back and make that decision for ourselves. It might not be reflected in the final budget that gets presented to the state, but we are always moving and changing when it comes to the budget, a lot. I very much appreciate Mr. Herron's comments. I think that those are a lot of out-of-the-box ideas that we need to start thinking of. Most of them, I think, will be for 10-11 instead of 9-10. And so we'll have some time to gather the information on it. As most of you know, I've been spending some time in the archives and looking at specifically some documents from the late 70s and early 80s. And at the time, I kept looking at that over the past few months thinking, well, at least I wasn't on the board in the late 70s when they had to deal with Proposition 13 and made huge cuts in 1 year. But now I'm starting to feel like we're at that level. And it is back to some of the worst days in education, unfortunately. For the 09-10 expenditures that are on this list that we have in front of us, I'm reluctant to go to 25-1. I can see that it's probably going to be necessary. The one thing that I would ask is perhaps that our 3 program improvement schools be kept at a lower ratio than 25-1. I think everybody at this point is at 21.45. I prefer those PI schools to stay at that point or at 22. I'm actually tremendously dismayed about this groundskeeper situation because, frankly, our schools are a mess as it is. And it's something that we get regular complaints on and a lot of concern about. And it's, I know that we want to keep things away from the classroom. I'm very troubled by that. Like my colleagues, I am not enamored of the idea of moving 9th grade English from 25-1 to 35-1. Again, if we could look at a scale to see if there's any possibilities of going partway there but not all the way there. I am very willing to spend federal stimulus money on saving teacher salaries, saving FTEs, even though it is one-time money. But we haven't gotten the specific information on that. And I would also like to be able to see exactly where our reserves are. And I guess a question for you is what happened to the May revise that was going to come out yesterday?
It didn't come out, so basically what we're dealing with now is just kind of a amalgamation of the pre-May revise, the May 29th, yeah, we haven't heard anything. So I think what we're waiting now is the conference committees are already meeting and trying to craft a budget. And there's a big push to have that budget adopted by June 15th, which is interesting because the governor hasn't introduced his budget trailer bill, which we're hoping, might provide us some relief. I mean, obviously, if it eliminated the revenue penalties on K-3 CSR, you probably wouldn't have to do much of anything in the elementary. So, but we're monitoring that.
Okay. From some of the things that Mr. Herron said, I absolutely agree that we may need to look at the special ed organizational recommendations and perhaps not hire one of the people that's on the list. Obviously, it's recommended by FCMAT, but it may be something that we need to phase in when there is more money available. And then there's the idea of reduction in salaries. Obviously, that would need to be negotiated probably for 10-11. For 09-10, I would like to know for administrators, can we implement administrative furloughs for 09-10? I know, obviously, administrators are on contracts that run March to March, and so I would like to know for sure whether or not we could bring that in as a possibility. Then specifically for the district office, I don't know where we stand in terms of, this is not just about district office administrators, but all staff. If there are positions that are unfilled, or if there are positions that may be resigned shortly, then can we look at either freezing those positions, or if there are duties that need to be reassigned in ways that significantly save money to the district. I think that we need to investigate that. And then for the board, in past years, I've really been dismayed because what's happened is that we've tried to be so sweeping that we've cut the tiny little stipend that board members get as it's a token, but it's an important token, I think. But at the same time, it becomes part of board policy, and it's a tricky thing to deal with. I would instead ask that we perhaps consider having a board pay furlough, not a work furlough, but a pay furlough where perhaps there's a month where we agree that we will not get the small stipend that we do get. So that is something to think about. Obviously, that will not make a dent, but I think it's important that we all participate in this very difficult and painful process. And any other questions or comments from board members? Mr. Herron?
Just one. On the secondary deferred maintenance transfer and the fact that we deferred elementary for, 2 years, do we have any money left for deferred maintenance?
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't do the deferral if we didn't have an ending balance that we could actually carry out. I mean, we can't do that indefinitely, but we can do it for now.
And so are we, one of the main complaints that I heard every single school I went to is how bad, our facilities are. And taking out all the money, for that, I know we have to do it.
Right.
But it bothers me when I see the general feeling about the condition of our campuses. It doesn't add to educational advancement if it is not a upbeat environment. So I don't know how you spend those monies, Mr. Young, but anything you can do to help whatever money we have, if you can help the school sites, at least keep the grounds and the buildings and the place operating the best as you can, I would appreciate it.
Any other comments? Mrs. Deacon?
One quick question, because I was intrigued with this golden handshake idea with the federal stimulus money, but what would that do for folks who've already retired? I mean, it would seem unfair to offer that to people as an incentive to retire this year when there's already people who've retired this year.
Maybe next year. I mean, there's only, I mean, you got to deal with that, but it's a big issue, but it's one we should look at.
Yeah. And we've had some preliminary discussions with SBTA about that, but obviously there's no way to do that for this year. So, I think Board President Parker highlighted a significant thing. We need to see where our ending balance is going to be, and we'll probably get a pretty good idea at our estimated actuals when the budget comes. So, but we'll probably be having those discussions relative to, how those dollars are used as soon as we can, get back in a room with SPTA and CSEA and all the other stakeholders.
Okay. For me, there is one other thing that I wanted to touch on. I'm really concerned about this auditing issue that showed that the ADA apportionment was overclaimed by $543,262. And I'm wondering if you can give me a little bit more information about that. How did that break out? And then how is that going to be corrected for the future?
Well, I can give you a specific breakout. It's probably better done through a board brief because it has a spreadsheet. Obviously, it was across all 3 high schools, but the majority of it occurred at one high school, and I'd rather not get into particulars there. As far as it's being corrected, one of the things that we noticed is that things that we had instructed, attendance staff were not matriculating back up to the decision makers. And so the way I'm going to deal with it with the biggest, player in the mix is I'm having a meeting prior to the start of school with that principal, all the APs, all the counselors, and all the attendance accounting. And my thought is if it happens again, we'll take it out of their staffing ratio.
Okay. All right, well, with that, we will be making decisions next Tuesday at a special meeting of the school board. So that agenda will be coming out by Friday. And I'm sorry that this is what it's come back down to again. And we will go ahead and take about an 8-minute break and come back for item F2. Item F2, which is review of board policy and administrative regulation 5116.1, intra-district open enrollment.
And Robin Sawaski, our Associate Superintendent, will introduce this.
Okay, here we are with this policy again. We just revised it in November of 2008. And as you can see from the memo, with our new revision and as we move as a nation, I guess, further into program improvement and the consequences of that, we did see that we had a couple of unintended consequences. And in particularly, students who I believe the board and many of us share feeling that should be able to have some kind of priority going to a school. We found that with the current way our policy is written with the priority areas, students of district employees, even at that school, but just district employees in general, are not, at this point, would not be able to go to the school. I mean, we're talking one child here, one child there, aren't allowed to do that because of the priority list. And the other piece would be that siblings of students have, we find this year for the first time, and it's just, it keeps changing as the landscape changes. And currently, our board policy reads that the program improvement schools, those transfers, are number 1 on the list, right below attendance area students, of course. Attendance area is always going to be first, but then program improvement. And within that, this year, we found a tiered leveling of the program improvement of siblings, students of, that. So it got more and more convoluted. And so in talking to staff, and particularly Michael Gonzalez, who oversees the student services, and a couple of board members, we thought we should bring it back. And I've put forward we also talked about it in cabinet. I should talk about that as well, and reviewed this. And I've put forth an idea of what it might look like, but if it's not actually like a first reading of a policy at all. It's meant to just give some ideas around how we might revise it, and we want the discussion. Do you want me to go forward and talk about the different pieces?
Or shall we just go ahead and take public comment and jump in, because we're going to have questions for you anyway?
Whatever you want is fine with me.
Let's go ahead and take
Okay,
public comment,
fine.
and then we'll come back, because we'll certainly have questions for you.
Lisa Fell, followed by Stacy Borak, followed by Lenny Evenstein.
Hi, I'm Lisa Fell. Again, I'm the new PTO president of Washington School, and I'm speaking on behalf of the parents and teachers at Washington again, and I was going to request that you change your priorities to allow siblings of current students at Washington who are incoming kindergartners to come to the school this year. And it looks like you've really given this some serious thought, and that might actually happen. What I really urge you to do is to please consider implementing this retroactively so it happens right now for the incoming students for this fall. And so I can't urge that enough. And you know the impact that would have if they weren't allowed So thank you.
Thank you.
Stacy Bork.
Hi, I'm Stacy Borick. Sorry, I have a cold, so my voice is very scratchy. But I'm here today because I was here today for the DP lottery. And I feel that the administration of the lottery did not follow the board policy. And the flaws of which are that the enrollment priorities were established given students of performance improvement schools an option to transfer, but yet in the lottery, they were given priority in the DP lottery. There were actually 3 lotteries instead of 1, which was miscommunicated to me as what the procedure would be. I was told 2 weeks ago there were 38 kids in the lottery and that I could either be number 1 or number 38. Everyone was equal. I was not informed of the policy that there were different priorities. My son actually falls into 2 of the top 4 priorities, which have not been adequately addressed by the school that he attends now at Goleta Valley. So in the end, he came in with best spot being number 13. There was pool number 1 through 5. Santa Barbara High was siblings. Sibling is low on the priority list. Pool number 2 were Santa Barbara High kids. And that was 7 through 12 spots. And the third pool was 13 through 32, which my son fell in that category, which was not properly identified as having met some of the other criteria. So I'm just here to ask that the policy be reviewed and how it was administered with the lottery today, and reconsideration be given to how that be done.
Thank you.
Board, we'll contact the speaker and make sure we're very clear about this.
Dr. Sarvis just mentioned he will contact, or his staff, or someone will contact you to talk to you further.
Yes.
Lanny Ebenstein, followed by Mark Pomerantz.
President Parker, members of the board, Dr. Sarvis. Transfer policies are very difficult, and they will repeatedly come back to the school board over the years. And you've received letters from me on this topic, and they're somewhat broader than some of the concerns, but just to mention them briefly, I think that there are genuine unintended consequences of the program improvement status at the federal level. And we don't have a lot of choice about that, but we do have choice about what we can do in the Santa Barbara school districts. And as I've indicated in my correspondence, it seems to me that you have 2 conflicting goals, which are both valuable goals, which are freedom of choice, which is always positive, and at the same time socioeconomically diverse schools, which are a hallmark of the Santa Barbara school districts at their best. And I think that it's important, as you consider transfer policies, that you attempt to balance both of these goals. One of my concerns is in particular at the junior high school level, where there are now 3 program improvement schools, or going to be 3 program improvement schools with the exception of La Colina. And it seems to me that to establish a circumstance in which transfers are encouraged to go to that school, which is the least socioeconomically diverse, is not positive. And that for that reason, one of the ideas that I think you could give consideration to would be establishment of magnet academies or something along those lines at each of Santa Barbara Junior High, La Cumbre, and Goleta Valley Junior High in order to meet the program improvement option requirements, and while at the same time try to work to retain socioeconomic diversity at those schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pomerantz?
Good evening. Thanks for the chance to speak here. My name is Dr. Mark Pomerantz. I'm the parent of a soon-to-be 3rd grader at Washington School. And I'm one of the families at Washington who has a kindergartner coming in, and was hoping to have a kindergartner come in, but under the November rules and priorities for transfers, we were one of the families that was looking like we were going to be way down at the bottom of the transfer list and not be able to get our kindergartner into Washington. So I want to commend everyone for coming up with this new prioritization. Obviously, we'll benefit, but I think the schools benefit because it creates the possibility to keep the families together and keep sort of generations of kids and families in there supporting the schools that have been building the schools up and making the schools great, like Washington it's been. And, you know, with respect to the increase in kindergarten class size, do you go to 22? Do you go to 25? Should PI schools have a lower ratio? I think somebody's got to really look at the big picture and see, okay, well, what does that mean? How many kindergarten classes is that going to be? If you have a pressure from the PI schools to go to the higher scoring schools and you decrease the class size at the PIs, raise them at the schools like Washington, you're going to effectively decrease the number of kids coming into Washington and have less teachers, less kindergartners, less first graders, et cetera. So I think I agree with President Parker that it's important to keep the ratios low, but I think the big picture is how is it going to affect all the kindergartners, and especially with the PI kids wanting to come into the better performing schools. You know, and I think somebody has to have all the numbers, you know, the board and somebody at an administrative level, and just really crunch the numbers and see. But I really appreciate the new look at the priorities here. I really would like you to see it done retroactively so that we can continue at Washington, and all the other families that were affected by the November ruling can still benefit from this prioritization that you've come up with. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Board members, comments on the proposed changes? And we can ask Ms. Waske the questions that we came up with as it goes by. Anybody want to chime in? Mrs. Deacon?
I like the new ordering, I have to say. And I wonder if when we talk about district employees, do we need to specify here that it is at the school where the employee is teaching?
That was a very specific conversation we had at the cabinet level, and we felt that it was important that it was all district employees. And you can see on the back, the second page, there are two strikes. One, we had two separate items before. One was employees of that school, and one was with 3 or more hours. And then one was district employees. That was it was just a recommendation from a cabinet discussion. But we did look at it. It wasn't a mistake.
Could
Mrs.
you,
Scudero?
I'm sorry, just to follow up on that, I didn't mean to cut you off, but could you explain what Cabinet's reasoning was for?
The reasoning was that the way it's playing out, people at the school, certainly district employees, are not being able to have their students attend a school where they would like them to go. And we felt like in this time particularly where we have teachers being cut, we have very little kind of any type of incentive, any kind of perk, if you will, anything like that. We thought this is like the least we can do. And it's not necessarily all that many students.
Mrs. Deacon, did you want to continue?
I think I'm being dense here, but I understand it's all employees, not just teachers, but do they have the option then of going to another school besides the one where they work? That's what you just said, right?
Yes, that would be correct.
Because I guess I'm just wondering what kind of message that sends, is that, if we don't think the school where they are is appropriate for their child or good enough for their child. I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of mulling that over in my head about what kind of message that sends to all the families in the district.
I don't know that many of them even have taken advantage of that. I don't really know. We don't have the data on that. If it's a student from a program improvement school, this would not even apply really. They'd be in that category there. A lot of students go to their neighborhood school. I mean, a lot of teachers support that as well. So I don't know numbers exactly.
Well, we have looked at that anecdotally. Normally, our employees are having their children attend the school they're at.
I actually see this as more of a district office issue, since they don't have a school site. But I mean, I think I see where you're heading with this, Mrs. Deacon, and I have concerns about that too, because while I completely understand why a site employee should have precedence, I mean, they are there, and hopefully they are there very long term. But for somebody who's not at the site, to possibly bump a sibling, that is what concerns me. So, but go ahead with your.
And, okay, well.
Well, we could break that out and put it 2 again. I mean, it's whatever you guys decide.
Something to think about, yeah. I definitely like the sibling component here. I mean, to me, it always just made sense, you know, that what's good for families is good for the schools. It's good for the teachers. It's good for the other kids. I think that's great. So then I guess the question is it possible to make this retroactive? Because are there enough spots then? I mean, if we bump up class size, maybe there is, but.
I can tell you that our approvals have not been completed yet. Parents have, first because of the budget situation and not knowing class size, we have, let it go longer. And then Mr. Gonzalez sent out a letter when we thought it was going to be about time that it would be after June 1st. Well, because we still haven't made the decision about 25-1. So we don't know exactly where that class size sits. So we have not placed students yet. We're still hanging out there. So in my mind, that could be a board decision that we could make it retroactive.
But what about the lottery numbers?
The lottery numbers are still in place.
But potentially a sibling might bump someone with a high lottery number then.
Potentially, but no one's been placed like
Right.
No one knows where. I mean, they know their numbers, but.
Right.
Well, that would mean reassigning lottery numbers, wouldn't it? If we move a category up?
Yes, but we wouldn't do a new lottery because they were in categories of, the siblings were in a separate category from just a program improvement. There were program improvement siblings.
So the lottery category would possibly shift, and so people's placements their numbers may have a lower effect, but
right.
it would, okay.
But
okay.
we wouldn't redo the whole thing. We could just shift it appropriately.
Okay, Mrs. Cordero, any comments?
I actually am pretty much in agreement with the way that it's been revised, but I'm in total disagreement with making it retroactive. I really, as much as I think that it may have been an error on our part to not have the revision, I think having families go through that process with one set of expectations and then sort of coming in at the 11th hour and changing it puts me in mind of this parent's concerns about today having a lack of understanding about what the process was and feeling as if the process hadn't been followed appropriately. Were I a parent in that process and I had been given one set of criteria, and then after seeing, and this would be my take on it, after we saw that it didn't produce the results that we wanted, we changed the process, would not sit well with, I think, a lot of families. I think to go through this, as we published it, granted that may not have been the best draft, but I think we need to go through with it as we publish it since we have already started the process.
I understand what you're saying exactly. One thing to consider, along with the class size piece, is that the sentence that talks about, that we added in November, that is actually Ed Code, about no additional classrooms shall be open based on attendance area enrollment, only on that, not due to inter-district transfers. When we did the lottery, we were looking at only 3 kindergartens at some of the most impacted schools, Washington, Roosevelt, because that was where we were at the limit with attendance area enrollment. At this point, I'm not sure about Washington. I know that Roosevelt's jumped so that we probably already have 4. again, that depends upon if we go 25-1. So there's still some variables here. However, by adding the district shall annually establish school sites, now in the AR it says by January 1st, you know, and we've pretty much looked at numbers. I don't know if it'd make a difference to the board at this point, but in looking at who's in the lottery, all those people who have numbers, and who's hanging out there, and Michael Gonzalez, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe all of our program, and if we were able to open classrooms where we think we can and we have the room, I believe we would have all of our siblings placed. We would have all of our program improvement transfer requests honored, and we would have all of those most important students in the lottery place. The ones that were below that probably already, that they were so far below that they were not expecting that they would get in, and they still wouldn't.
But given the likelihood that there probably will be some adjustment in class size, you know, it seems to me that we might be facing some situation where not every student will be accommodated.
We could potentially, and you know, also in that same scenario that I just painted, potentially siblings could get in as well. I'm just, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At any rate, my concern is always changing the rules in the middle of the game. And I even if the rules favor me, it's just not a, you know, I don't think it's a ethical thing to do.
And that's not part of my recommendation. That's
Yeah, we didn't
completely
see
a
that.
board decision.
Okay.
The only recommendations I'm bringing forth are the priorities, and there's a change in the date to March 31st as well, making that enrollment period longer.
Mr. Herron, any comments?
Yes, and I've attended the lottery at Roosevelt, and I attended the lottery today at Dos Pueblos. And although I don't agree with some of the logic behind it, I wanted to say that it was done extremely professionally. Mr. Gonzalez, I thought, was excellent. I thought he described the process and talked to the parents individually as long as they wanted to talk. So I think the process, and Mr. Gonzalez was very good. One of the reasons I've been asking to have this on the agenda is because I disagree with some of the priorities as they are interpreted. And so I prepared something. I'm just going to read it. It covers some of the things we've talked about, but so I don't ramble. I just want to read this. I hope it won't take too long, because it covers a lot of things. First, I want to say very clearly that I'm a believer in the concept of neighborhood schools. I'm a product of Peabody School and its neighborhood. Having said this, it is my belief that in recent years, this district has not had policies favoring neighborhood schools and has actively promoted open enrollment. The title of BP 5116.1 is entitled Intra-District Open Enrollment, and the first paragraph clearly is indication that this is the case. There is no mention that the district values the concept of neighborhood schools. The reason we are having this discussion today is that in October and November of last year, the school board added some wording to this policy, and it's the part about not opening new classrooms, which for this coming year is being interpreted and mandated as intended to encourage families to attend their neighborhood school, per a letter sent to concerned families. From watching the tape of the meeting, I personally don't believe the intent of that meeting was to immediately and dramatically change our method of dealing with intra-district transfers. In fact, it was introduced as a minor revision. Obviously, and with no discussion other than a question from Mrs. Cordero, obviously it wasn't minor based upon the interpretation that has taken place, especially at the elementary level. My first point is that if we really believe we want to endorse the concept of neighborhood schools, this section should clearly state in place of the first sentence that the Board of Education values the concept of neighborhood schools and open enrollment within available resources. Possibly the title of the section should also be changed to include neighborhood schools as an emphasis. Now, when it comes to specific changes, and some of these have already been mentioned, so excuse me, I'm not in favor of the new item number 1, giving priority rights to students of district employees. I prefer the separation of the types of district employees spelled out currently in G and 1, or G and I. I particularly am not in favor of the highest priority given to district employees who have no relationship to the requested school. In addition, I would prefer the benefit, regardless of priority, to be given to full-time or perhaps half-time district employees, and not to every employee. Regarding the new number 2, what is the intended result in following years when the higher sibling graduates to a secondary school? Do they go on and stay at that school, or do they have to now go back into the priority because they no longer have a sibling at the school? So does that need to be at least clarified? In priorities 1 and 2, is there any priority difference given to children of employees and siblings coming from PI school? If a lottery needs to take place, do children of district employees and siblings get priority in a lottery if they are from a PI school over the same category of children from a PI school? Does a district employee with siblings get priority over a district employee with no siblings? Should all this be clarified? The current system is, even though Title I school says it's number 1 priority and low achieving and low economic students are number 1, they really aren't. Because all of a sudden now you say, okay, you're a PI and you have a child, a sibling, you move to a higher position. Or you're a PI and you're a district employee, you move to a higher position. There's nothing in this that says, that I can read, that you need to combine different categories. To me, it says priority is this, and second priority is this, and the interpretation that's been given to this is, okay, yeah, we understand PI school is number 1, but now we're going to put somebody higher than number 1 because they have a sibling. I just say we need to clarify. We need to make sure that we understand what the priorities are. When it comes to number 5, it's an interesting one. If you read number 5, it seems to indicate that the superintendent, in the situation described, can move a student to the top of the list, in fact, supersede the list. The very last sentence, that's one topic. In that same paragraph, the very last sentence indicates priority shall be given for students transferred by board action. It doesn't really seem to apply to the priority outlined number 5, and I wonder if it should have its own number. And should the same priority rights that supersede all priorities be granted to the board as are granted to the superintendent if we decide to transfer a student? And finally, what is the time period intent of this priority change? Will the lottery list currently in existence totally change, or will new priorities, when passed, be implemented in 2010, 2011? Should the answer to this be made clear? And I think we've talked about that. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Herron. And I'll piggyback on that. I think that your new sentence to open the board policy on interdistrict open enrollment is a great idea. And obviously, interdistrict open enrollment, that's the standard board policy, sort of the CSBA boilerplate for 5116.1. And I'm not sure if we'd want to change the actual title because that might be confusing to people looking at it from outside the district. But I'm certainly open to changing the title. That would be fine with me also. But I think that the new first sentence is a great idea. My comment on paragraph 3, where it says additional classrooms shall be opened based, I certainly found that there was a lot of confusion about this past year, and perhaps that should be changed to classes instead of classrooms. I agree with several of the board members who said that number 1 should, instead of being what's listed, priority shall be given to students of district employees, instead be the same language as there is for the existing letter G, which does give a minimum, it gives priority to parents, students of parents who work a minimum of half-time at the school.
And well, are you saying that should be number 1?
That should be
that's
number 1.
Number 1, and then.
And then I would move current number 1 down to number 3.
Okay.
After siblings of students.
So is that the way you're handling employees who work in the district office?
Exactly. That would be my suggestion, is to move them down to 3rd priority.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. So we would still have a distinction then between employees who work at the school and the rest of the employees?
Exactly. So
Okay.
number one would be priority shall be given to students whose parent guardian is assigned to that school as his or her primary place of employment for 3 or more hours per day. Then number two would be priority shall be given to siblings of students. Priority 3 would then be priority shall be given to students of other district employees. And maybe we should definitely put in the other. I think that those are all the comments I had on the board policy. On the AR, I want to note that there is, on number 3, enrollment shall be determined by priority order as necessary, and as necessary, a random unbiased lottery. And I think that's the language that Mr. Herron is trying to perhaps clarify even a little bit further. Maybe we can think about how that could be worded to make it clear that even within a priority order, there are priorities within priorities. And I'm not going to give you suggested language right now, but you can
Right.
think about that.
One thing that occurs to me is that priority order within the program improvement group has been siblings and I guess employees. So now that they're up above that, maybe I'm not thinking, I need to think this through more clearly.
Perhaps there's
but-
only one space available, for example, at a school, kindergarten, and it turns out that there are 3 teachers with trying to bring in kindergartners. And one of them is at a program
I
improvement
see.
boundary school.
Okay, yes.
So there
Within that,
there could
yes.
still be that same.
Or one is at a PI school and also is a district employee and also have siblings.
Right,
You
would
know,
they
so in other
have
words-
more priority?
But see,
Yes.
but that's I guess that's my point. You just got through saying priority is at the old G. And now we're saying, oh, but if this happens, that's priority. You know, and that's interpretation. That is a direct interpretation of what these said by, you said, well.
Right.
it's
So
a
we
direct-
would need to make that, I mean, obviously, board members, we could decide, and I don't know, but I do think that makes some sense for there to be
Because we
priorities
don't
within
have any
priorities.
language in here that says, that references students who fall into more than one of the priority categories.
Right, and actually, this year was the first time that occurred, because up until this year, we've been able to place siblings, district employees, and all of our program improvement transfers that have been requested. So, again, we made the policy in November. When I said, Mr. Herron, this was a rather minor change, that time it was, but as it turned out, with all of the applications, it turned out to be not a minor change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was put in there as if, okay, here's some words, and all of a sudden, somebody interpreted it very stringently compared to history. And so I just, it wasn't minor. And I think interpretation played a role in that. But I didn't answer my own question about the lottery. I mean, if we even attempt to change those lists, I think that is wrong. These people drew a number, and somebody who got a 1, they're elated. And if you went back to that person with number 1 and say, oh, sorry, we changed the rules, you're now number 10. I mean, that's not how to treat people.
Going on the AR, I question the March 31st date. Why was that switched from March 1st? I mean, I know that obviously this is the first year we had a May 1st deadline, but in the past, the early enrollment deadline of March 1st has always been hanging out there, and it made some sense to me just to switch it to the existing March 1st deadline for early enrollment. Just make that your ultimate deadline.
This
So-
was a recommendation from our student services staff. Mr. Gonzalez sat with his staff that works with the parents and gets all of these applications. And because the 31st is actually a very clear deadline at that point, and it's usually falls right before our spring break or somewhere in that area, we felt that by extending that period where we would have all of the transfers come in, and then that's the end. It's not like to May 1st again or before, all the way to August 31st or whatever. At that point, it ends. That's a difference here. And that by June 1st, we would inform applicants that they're, you know, in or out of a certain school, your application's approved, and then the only revoking of that would be when attendance area students move into a school and we would have to displace someone who's already been placed.
I guess for me, I would rather see things shift a little bit the other direction, like open enrollment earlier than
Oh, like
January 1st.
December or
Like
something?
December 1st and end it March 1st. And then the other question I had was about that final deadline, because it says by June 1st, the superintendent or designee shall inform applicants by mail. And I feel like there's so much enrollment information that comes in over a summer. Obviously, neighborhood schools are always our first priority. And so I think it might make more sense to have that be like an August 1st deadline and have families get notified a little bit later once it's more clarified and they're less likely to get their transfers revoked because neighborhood students have come in.
That's completely up to the board. This is actually a reaction from parents. This is now my 4th year being a part of this, not in charge of it this year totally, but every year it's really very, very hard for parents to have to wait. They want to go to the open houses. They want to see the school. You know, they don't want to wait until summertime, particularly those younger students. Most of the time it's kindergarten, and they want to have their student know where they're going.
Except for that the problem with that is that they don't honestly know where they're going. And so that's what really worries me more than anything, is the idea of you thinking you're going someplace, and then it turns out that this school has gotten 8 kids that came in over the summer to enroll. And I think that's even more devastating. And I know that our neighboring districts, Goleta Unified, for example, does not notify until after school starts. And so I feel like August 1st, it is later, and that is difficult, but it's always going to be difficult to be a transfer parent. And so that's where I'm leaning towards with an August 1st.
It's your choices, obviously.
And just one other thing on that, in item number 3, it says late applicants after, March 31st or March 1st, whichever it is, shall not be added to this waiting list. I think that maybe it'd be clearer that if it just said late applicants shall not be accepted, because they won't be accepted for the following school year. They have to then apply for the year after.
That makes sense. And that wording was actually taken from the other.
Right.
So I think it shall not be accepted.
Would you keep the accept?
Yeah, then it goes accepted, yeah, absolutely. I think that next sentence about how if you're new into the area, if you're moving into a program improvement school, that actually, that makes perfect sense. So board members, further comments or questions? Mrs. Deacon, Mrs. Cordero? Who's going for it first? Mrs. Cordero?
I just wanted to agree with you that I think for number 4, the June 1st notification date is probably too early to have a lot of meaning, because so many things can shift after that. It seems like we would be in a position of possibly having to re-notify a fair number of families, and that creates its own level of frustration. I don't know if I think the August 1st deadline is too late or not. I do think it's, part of the process of transferring, using an intra-district transfer, that you may have to, the downside of that is you may have to wait to really know for sure your student status. But I don't know, I'm willing to be a little bit flexible maybe on what the date actually should be, but I think it should definitely be after June.
What about going back to something we've had previously and say we approved 90%? We're really talking kindergarten for the most part here, because we roll over, and that whole 90% before was kind of not a joke, but it was usually 100% because, 80 kindergartners rolled into 80 first grade. Here, give and take a few. With kindergarten, if we went to maybe a 90% June 1st or the end of the school year or something like that, we could at least let those parents that are in that big, larger group know. It's a thought.
I'm not sure that it really helps. And in some ways, I think it might be nice just to have it standardized.
Be a lot more work on the part of the office to do all of that.
I'm reluctant at a time when we're looking at possibly making cuts in personnel to add additional levels of work. I think right now, I mean, down the road, if it seems like that would be workable and appropriate, then we might consider it. At this point, given that I still feel like I don't know what our staffing is going to be like, I want to keep it as clean and, simple as possible.
Mrs. Deacon?
Okay, well, I'll read Mr. Wheeler's note here, which points out there are 2 year-round schools that start July 17th, so we obviously would have to make some accommodation for those schools.
We were just having that discussion.
Yeah.
It probably won't be a problem this year, however, it might in future years.
Okay, all right.
Maybe we put like 3 weeks before school starts.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I can see the merits actually of both a June or an August date, and I'm wondering about the impact on staffing and summers if people are around, and if it's easier to send out the notifications in June because you're geared up and ready to do that. On the other hand, maybe there is less work by August because it is more definitive, and so then you're not having to come back to people again later.
Usually, district office staff is kind of in and out most of the summer. Most of our principals come back August 1st after, probably about a month vacations, give or take.
The other thing I wanted to just note was we've got specific dates here. It seems to me that this year one of our deadlines fell on a weekend. I'm wondering if it doesn't make more sense to say the first Friday of a month or the first Monday, because we really are locking ourselves in. Yeah, I mean, by picking a specific date that inevitably is going to fall on a weekend sooner or later, there's a lot of confusion, I think, for parents. Do I have to have it in the Friday before? Is the Monday after the viable date?
Okay, I believe it usually said the day, I have to find where it says, it was the, when school is in session. Here it is, like, on the number 1 on page 2 of 5 on the AR, it says, the list of schools and open enrollment applications shall be available at all school offices by the beginning of the open enrollment period of January 1st through March 31st when school is in session. So that could be clarified more, you're saying. It's never going to be on January 1st.
Because I think that's only referring to the list also.
Yeah, I think we just want to make this as user-friendly as possible. And going back to Mr. Herron's whole idea about all the permutations, I mean, parents go through this with a fine-tooth comb trying to figure out, what they need to do. And so I think we just need to spell it out as carefully as we can.
Mr. Herron?
I think there was one family today and maybe Mr. Gonzalez can correct me if I'm wrong, that said they came in on the Monday after the 31st and were told that they had to have it on the 27th of February. So the 27th was since they weren't open on the 28th, you had a 27th, and the comment was, well, what was wrong with Monday? I mean, what's so exciting about the day before or the day after? It's, taxes, if taxes fall on a Sunday, we have until Monday. So the federal government has set a sort of a definition of that issue right there.
So we can look at that. We try as much as we can, of course, to advertise it. It's, everywhere we can be, but it should be in our policy probably more precisely.
Mrs. Cordero?
I was just going to recommend exactly that we just have language that says if any deadline falls on a Saturday or a Sunday, the deadline will extend till the following Monday, 5 o'clock, end of working hours on the following Monday. Because I think it's a lot easier for people to think about getting it in that day after than 2 or 3 days ahead.
Gotcha. All right. The one final comment I would make is that if this were in place, for example, with the June 1st deadline right now, we would be in trouble because we aren't going to know what class sizes are. So there may be times when we need to change the date. So, and I don't know if there needs to be some language around that. When possible or something like that. So that needs to be something that we consider also. All right.
Can I make one comment? Mr. Herron, you mentioned on one of the priorities, the number 4 and 5. Those are directly out of the public law. It's dealing with NCLB, No Child Left Behind, as far as the persistently dangerous school and a school where the bodily harm. So those are drawn.
But my point was, if you read 5.
Yes.
It says the superintendent, where's it? The superintendent may approve a student's transfer to a district school that is at capacity and otherwise closed to transfers upon finding. Well, what that tells me is, forget the priorities, he can do what he wants. And so why is it number 5?
If these circumstances
Well, exactly, but if they exist, it's really priority 1. It's not a 5, it's a 1. And then at the bottom of that, it says priority should be given for students transferred board action. What? I mean, if the board says we want to move somebody, don't we move them? Or do we have to say, oh, no, I'm sorry, we got to get a lottery ticket? You know, I mean, and it doesn't seem to relate to all the words above it in 5. It just stands there by itself because we're not involved in that superintendent's decision. Superintendent feels it best under these circumstances to move regardless of capacity. I mean, why isn't that priority 1?
Mrs. Scudero.
I'm wondering if that, because I think Mr. Herron is correct that those do in effect supersede all the other priorities. I'm wondering if we could make that part of a prefatory statement or something like that before we begin to list the priorities.
I certainly can, and these actually, I mean, we've never even had this happen once. I mean, it would be very rare. None of our schools are persistently dangerous. I mean, we could move these to number 1, knowing that they never happen, but we could preface something around
Yeah,
that.
maybe it should just not be in the
they shouldn't be a
priority.
priority.
Right. Oh, not in the
Right.
pull them
Just
out
pull
with
it
that.
out, just put it as a, yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
that's a great idea. Thank you.
Mrs. Deacon?
Go ahead.
I just want to say one, I think, final thing here is that I know we're reacting to current circumstances, but we also know that more and more of our schools are probably going to fall into program improvement. And pretty soon, we may not have a place for them to go, you know. And so we need to come up with a long-range plan and be thinking 3 to 5, it looks like you're already
Well-
doing this, but we need to, you know, think long-term and start putting those, you know, ideas and strategies in place so that we don't get caught off guard.
Actually, in future board items, we had this policy and alternative program improvement options for placement as one discussion topic, and we felt that it really deserved to be pulled out and have to be 2. So that is a definite on a future agenda item.
I presume that
Yes.
the language you've added in that second or third paragraph, starting with however, which gives us the right to establish school sites, that was intended, that even though they're full, or that we aren't supposed to open a class, if there's a PI need, we can open a class. So if long-term, every school is PI, hopefully not, we would have to start opening classes someplace in opposition to that policy.
Yeah, there are lots of alternative ideas on how to do that. So we will have that discussion.
All right.
I also heard a statement from Mr. Herron of concern about students being bumped who are actually at the top of the list, maybe the new 1, which is the old G, and the 2 priority given to siblings, et cetera. And it had to do with students who are already in attendance at the school.
Yes.
And whether they would then be bumped. And I know the charters have often handled that by just putting that at the top of their list.
Yeah, one of my questions was if
Just
today
saying.
a sibling joins because they have a
Yes.
sibling, that sibling graduates, that person no longer has a sibling in the school.
But now they're
But there's-
on, yeah. Intradistricts are not renewed.
Right.
once-
Okay,
But-
that was,
But I think that's worthwhile to
say
state,
that.
make clear as a new number 1 above all of these others, students already in attendance at the school or already enrolled at the school.
I think that's in there. There is a paragraph that says, once you,
It says
you
that
don't
the.
have to reapply.
Right, it says that you're already in unless there's attendance area kids that
Yes.
come in, and that's, I
I
think
would
that's
just
clear.
rather have it stated
Okay.
in that priority list.
Sure.
That's all.
Hopefully this can be written really clearly from all the directions that we've given to you and just come back to us on a consent agenda item.
That won't happen. And you know, that's what gives me a comment.
Yeah.
Sometimes we put consent items, and you almost know they're going to be a discussion item, but yet we force the public to talk at one time and not when the issue is on. So I think we need to be careful when we put things on the consent calendar if we have any inkling that they're going to be talked about, because it separates the public from the event, and it puts the event way at the end of the day, at night, sometimes midnight. But that's just an issue to look at.
Okay, we often use consent just to move things along because we limit our meetings to 10:30, and that becomes a big problem as well.
So with that, we are on to item F3, which I think that we are going to be pulling because it's at 10:15. We are, if this is truly going to take 20 minutes, and I guess I'm gonna ask board members, do you have questions worthy of 20 minutes conversation on this?
Which one?
Because we have a lot of items on the consent agenda that we need to get back to.
I do have a caveat, though.
Yeah.
And that is that on the 16th, we're going to take up budget cuts. We don't expect to take up any other issues. On the 23rd, we expect to have the FCMAT report on special education. That's going to limit our time. That will move this item to the 30th. And if we're moving ahead and making decisions about programs, then perhaps Robin Swaski can address whether that's a problem or not.
I want to make clear about how the Measure H staffing fits in and how we're interpreting how the supplementing issue applies here, as well as there's a question about the budget. If the board desires to have this as a separate budget that would be approved, we wouldn't do it right now, but right now it's currently will be in the adopted budget. So
I'm wondering
there's a
if we
couple
could get
questions.
this as a board brief report in detail, and then if there's action that you're going to recommend, that it come back to us on an agenda in that form.
Okay, it's not really action, I'm not recommending an action.
Okay. Let's get this as a board brief report then. All right. We're on to item G, return to consent items designated for discussion. And the first item that was pulled was D2, that was me, approval of additional fundraising for 0809 for Santa Barbara Charter School and Santa Barbara High School. But before we do that, Mr. Herron had just a quick correction to make on one of the minutes from item D1. And maybe we can just move to amend that particular one.
Let me make the point and then see if, on page 6 of 7 of the April 28th, quarter of the way down, the board returned item E1, and then there's a whole series of additional cuts. Those were backup. And so I don't want anybody to read that and say we made those decisions. It turns out we didn't have to do them. So should it say the board returned item E1 for Plan B? Plan B, expense reductions, or I think, are they all expense? It gives the impression that we voted on all of those and they should be implemented when in fact it was Plan B. So,
Mimi, do you see that? Does that make sense?
so that we, and do I need to make a motion to reopen the
Yes.
minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to reopen the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I would like to amend the approval of minutes to include the board returned item E1 for Plan B budget considerations.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, that carries 4-0, that change to those minutes. Next, it was item D2, and I did pull that one because Santa Barbara Charter plans to bring a flea market to its campus on Saturday starting next year, and I was just concerned about what input our facilities department had on that process. So,
And that was a wise caveat. So We'll return to the charter school, talk to them about flea market rules, and bring this back to you.
All right, so in the meantime, I would like to make a motion to approve the fundraising, the additional fundraising for Santa Barbara High School.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries 4-0. The next item that was pulled was item D6, the second reading and approval of reading language arts textbook adoption. And that was you, Mr. Herron.
I'll start, but once again, I have a written document I just hope to read. And there are some questions, so maybe we will I'll ask the questions as I get to them. But first, I want to make sure to everybody who is still here that I don't second guess the program in any way, shape, or form. I think the curriculum is up to the curriculum people, and if they've studied this, I hope they've done it right. But I'm not going to try to micromanage of that part of it. At the same time, it is extremely hard for me to sit here and simply on the consent calendar approve a significant expenditure such as this. Many of my questions have been answered in communication with staff, and for that I am grateful. But since technology is one of my main concerns for this district, I do have some questions still to ask, plus a couple passed on to me by Dr. Noel. I will try to be as brief as possible. In general, we are being asked to approve tonight $1,650,000 for the READ 180 program, of which $400,000 is for implementation, equipment, and training from the EETT grants, which is later on the agenda. I also presume there will be additional funds needed in the future for training in general. To the public, I'm sure this seems like a strange action when we will be told later on, or we have already been told, how many millions of dollars we still need to cut from our budget, and some of the minor things we will be looking at for savings costing pennies in comparison. After 6 months on the job, I realize more fully that there are several various pots of funds, all with convoluted rules and regulations on spending from them, and the cost of this program is coming from a few of those pots. An overriding question I have, however, is what was the cost of an alternative program? I understand it might have been substantially less. And if it had been recommended, how would we have spent the money? That is not part of this. By choosing this program, will any programs within our district be put off, cut, or curtailed as a result of this course of action? Were these trade-offs evaluated by administration? I'm not going to get an answer now, just that's a question. Every time we spend $1, that means something else is going to be affected. This is $1.6 million. What else is affected? That were they looked at and considered? Dr. White, question for you, and I've got several. How much of this total expense is one-time in nature, and how much is ongoing? Do we have an estimate of the projected cost for 2010, 2011?
The majority of the cost is a one-time cost. The recurring costs for READ 180 are, there's a $9.98 per student for the consumable workbook. And we do that with many of our adoptions. We buy a workbook that has a cost of between $8 and $15. So that's a ongoing cost. There's an ongoing web hosting cost, which is a couple of $1,000s per school. The rest of it is a one-time cost, and the way that READ 180, there is research on READ 180, but this is a new READ 180. It was packaged for the California adoption, and so the cost is quite high because they packaged it so that the licenses are a lifetime license, and it's a web-hosted program, and so the updates come free with having chosen the web hosting over the software option. In the past, READ 180 was an annual licensing fee, so this is why this is quite expensive. I don't know if you wanted me to answer your rhetorical question as well about the alternative cost. Okay. The alternative cost would have been between $65 and $75 per student.
How many students?
And for each, I don't have the, I'd have to get my calculator out because I know I can tell you each school how many we're serving. But it would have been significantly less. It would have probably in the secondary range somewhere around the $300,000 mark. and probably something similar in elementary. So I guess, in giving you what the principals have talked about, because we had quite a number of meetings on this. We started meeting in October, and we met all year about this, and the principals met separately to consider, if we buy this, it means we are giving up other things. And I think, as was mentioned by a couple of the principals, we, like for example, La Cumbre spends $100,000 a year on intervention. And so, it's intervention that some of it's working well and some of it is not working well. So we are giving up things that we've tried that we have not been successful with in a larger general sense for a program that, when the teachers first saw it, the first thing that they said to me is, should we count this program out because it is expensive? And what the directive was to look at the programs and evaluate them on their merit. And we went through a very extensive process with the County Office of Education, tracing standards through the materials and looking at them in a very objective way. It's called the Toolkit. It's put together by the state of California.
Okay.
So,
are we going to be hit by anybody in the district that says, hey, we want to do this, but we can't because the money was spent on this Read 180?
I think you'll always have someone who says that. No matter which way we spend the money, there's always going to be someone that comes forward with something like this.
And we solicited for that kind of information. We looked at those options and tried to make sure that they weren't major.
Well, this is one-time money. I mean, this ERA money that's coming in that will pay entirely for the elementary portion of it is a one-time stimulus package money. It's the only really way that we could ever have afforded to purchase something like this at this time.
Does our projected cost include any of the maintenance and support plans offered by the company? If not, did we make a conscious decision not to purchase one? I've heard a complaint from one user that the tech service was frustrating. In your research, did this complaint surface?
Yeah, that does surface, especially in the districts where you can web host. The web hosting is brand new. It will start on August 1st. That's a brand new option that Read 180 is offering. They've been piloting it in Chicago.
I've got a question on that in a minute.
The current model that you're looking at where there are technology challenges is when it's either a school site that has an individual server or the server is being hosted by the district and the server goes down. And we know that in districts where you call Read 180 to come and fix your server, really you need to call Davis Hayden to come and fix your server. And we're not going with the server version. In fact, it was the technology, research and technology department that suggested that we go with the web hosting rather than the server model.
But we're not going to have the maintenance support plan that goes along with this project.
The maintenance support is when you do the software portion of it, not for the web hosting.
No, but there's a major plan that you have to have the maintenance and support plan in order to use this new edition. So I just wanted to make sure
That's part of. It's difficult to explain the California model because it came as a package. Whereas, for example, if we were living in Chicago and bringing this forward to you, it would not be lifetime licensing.
Okay.
That was specific for California. And so many of the components that if you call New York, unless they are very specifically addressing the California packaging, then you're not going to get an answer that may be relevant to what we've put forward to you.
Okay.
We've put forward to you what the company has suggested we need in terms of hosting this program.
And they haven't suggested we buy a maintenance and support plan?
No.
Okay. Will we be using the suggested workstations in the classroom, or will we be dependent upon the computer labs at the schools? Dr. Noel would like to know how large the typical class size will be.
Well, I've actually met with most of the principals individually, and each principal has a bit of a different plan. For example, I can speak to Monroe plans to have what they're going to call an A-B program. So they're going to host it in one room and have a group of students in the morning in Read 180 and then a group of students in the afternoon. And those students that are the morning students would then, function in the rest of the classrooms that they would be assigned to normally. I'm going to actually ask Joanne Keynes to answer how she is going to do it, because that's typical of a couple of our other schools. Dos Pueblos is going to have it in 2 rooms. Santa Barbara High is going to have it in a lab and a room. I mean, each school, we've talked about this individually, how we're going to implement the program.
Mrs. Keynes,
Joanne?
did you want to answer that question?
I want to add to, while we're waiting for Joanne, that not every single school is implementing this year. We're doing this over time. It's kind of a tiered implementation.
Good evening again. Lacumber's going to dedicate 3 computer labs to Read 180. We'll actually be running 4 classes at a time that will surround the lab. So we're going to have not teacher rooms, but Read 180 rooms. So there'll be 4 classes in the morning. They'll do the whole group in 4 different rooms, and then they'll rotate through, as was explained to you earlier. And then we'll run 4 in the afternoon as well. So it will start at 7:30 and end at 3:15.
Okay.
1 lab.
So that's different than the suggestion model. I mean, the suggestion model is you have time period here, and you just rotate in one classroom around. You're going to be using labs for the most part, it sounds like. But
No. We're going to use 1 lab, but the group splits into thirds. So let's just, okay, for round numbers, let's say you have 24 students. When those students split into thirds, 8 of them would go into the computer lab, so that your lab can actually host 4 thirds.
that's what I say, that they'll be separated out. They'll be asked to change rooms to go to the computer system.
Right, and all the rooms that will be Read 180 surround the lab, so
Good.
we're talking of 10 to 15 steps.
Good, perfect. I think the web version was made available, well, you've said, just last month. So I presume we will be one of the first users of the new web product. Have we seen it in operation and tested it? Have we been given any results or any access to other users of the web version, possibly from the pilot sites?
Yes, we have. It's in Chicago, and so we called Chicago to ask about that. And of course, because it was a pilot site, they did have issues, and Read 180 has been working on those issues to make sure that when they actually roll it out, that it doesn't have the glitches that one might expect in being one of the first districts to use it.
I'm sure Dr. Hayden would agree that anytime something's rolled out for the first time, it works perfectly. Dr. Noah would like to know if a comprehensive implementation plan exists at this point, and it sounds like the answer is yes. The schools are doing that at the moment.
Yes, each school has been working with me and with Dr. Hayden on an implementation plan, and I can't tell you that there aren't other people involved, because Meg Jate has been working with me. Also, Mr. Hetjank has been working with the sites on dropping the infrastructure that would need to be in place in classrooms where there isn't infrastructure. We're also requiring that each one of the teachers that is planning on teaching Read 180 take SB 472, which is 40 hours of training on Read 180, and then that's separate cost. That's would be part of Title II, and it's what we've been using our Title II money for math this past year, for the secondary, and then this summer for the elementary. In addition to that, the $17,000 that you're seeing is 2 days of an implementation specialist from Read 180 who comes to the classrooms of the teachers and helps them set up their rooms, and helps them practice and rehearse how to implement the program. It is complex, and as you heard from the teachers, they are willing to basically step out of the box and do things in a different way in order to implement this program.
Dr. Noel would like to know if any unrestricted funds have to be used for Read 180 for those students not eligible for for those schools not eligible for Title I funds.
We do have restricted lottery. For example, you're talking about a school like La Colina. We have restricted lottery funds that we can use, and EIA, which La Colina is eligible for both of those funding sources.
So we won't be using Title I funds in those schools?
No, we can't.
Okay. Dr. Hayden, first, I'm very happy that all the improvements that have been done basically less than, in this year, have increased our capability dramatically. And so you and your staff have made tremendous headway. I'm sure Mr. Smith has provided the money, which I'm very grateful for. We've taken a huge step forward. Do we currently have the capacity to meet the READ 180 suggested technology requirements and standards, such as the workstations in classrooms or in labs and teacher workstations? Is meeting the requirements of this program dependent upon getting the $400,000 EETT grant scheduled for later in the agenda? What are the chances of us receiving that grant, and what happens if we don't?
I do not believe that it's dependent upon the EETT grants. Cynthia,
Well-
I believe, just answered that
Well,
question.
you say in your background paper that that grant's going to provide $400,000 for training and implementation.
It will if we get it.
But if we don't get it-
don't get it, then Cynthia has just answered where the money is going to be coming from otherwise. So if we get the grant, then that will release the funds that Cynthia was planning to use to pay for READ 180.
Okay. And finally, one thing for Dr. White or Dr. Sawaski. What are your thoughts about a policy indicating that curricular decisions for students with disabilities shall be made by the IEP team rather than a rigid and confining policy if one does or will exist directing otherwise regarding READ 180?
I want to make sure I understand you. You want to know if we believe there should be a policy about, within an IEP setting,
Should the
making a
rules of 180
recommendation?
supersede what an IEP group
Oh,
thinks
of
should
course
happen?
not, of course not.
An IEP prevails.
IEP always prevails. That's a legal process. I
Thank-
do want to comment too that in the elementary district, we absolutely are required to adopt an intervention, reading language arts intervention. And you've heard all the, the READ 180 was the selected one. The one that was next up, that would have been maybe a far distant second choice, was just a pile of worksheets. So it's significantly different,
And
but
Dr.
we do need to do it.
Dr. Hayden, you feel our infrastructure for technology at the schools will handle this program, and we won't have similar situations in the past where we got this program, we can't use it because we can only access 2 computers out of a lab at one time?
Well, the infrastructure for bandwidth, since this is going to be web-based this time instead
Right.
of server-based, if it was servers, there would be a lot of work between now and when school starts. But since it's web-based, and since in July 1st our bandwidth is going to quadruple to 200 megabits, I don't think we're going to have any problems there. There could be a switch or two at a school that can't handle it, and we'll just have to swap it out.
But teachers aren't going to be frustrated. Teachers are going to...
I can't guarantee that teachers will not be
But at this point, we don't know of any technology reason why they should be.
No, I do
We
not
think our
know.
schools can handle it.
The plans we have in place should handle it with no problems.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry it took so long, but...
Any other board member questions, comments? Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I just want to comment, and granted, I'm coming at this from a bias because I am a reading teacher. But I just think, given that what we've been looking at for years and years and years with our English language learners and our achievement gap, given what we have been seeing in terms of how we want our students to achieve, I just feel that working on reading skills, if it is not the #1 priority in the entire district, it has to be tied with whatever is #1. And so it justifies the expense. And talk about teacher frustration. I remember when we went through this process, and I won't name the program we adopted, where teachers unanimously chose a program and had it overruled to adopt something else. And that resulted in frustration that exists to this day. So I think honoring the expertise of the committee that chose it and the principals who unanimously have endorsed it, I have to assume that principals considered whether their campuses could accommodate it or not, that this just seems to be something that we owe to our students?
Mrs. Deacon?
Well, first of all, I think the fact that it's web-based is huge. I mean, and I also suspect this is the wave of the future, and so it makes sense to start here, and hopefully it'll allay our concerns about the technology problem, because I agree, quite often we run into technological problems, but hopefully this is one we're past already. And I also am assuming, since we're buying a lifetime license, that we believe Scholastic will be in business forever, and hopefully we'll be able to support it and update it forever. I also would just like to say I really respect and value the opinion and the hard work of the team that went into making this decision, because I also am familiar with decisions in the past that didn't have the buy-in by the teachers. They're the ones we're asking to implement it, and so if they're excited about it and they think it's going to work, and clearly this is a huge area for us. It's a lot of money, of course. It is a lot, and I mean, it sounds like everyone's done their homework and really believes that this is the right way to go. So I certainly support it. And I guess I had one quick question about phasing it in. I think I heard it was being phased in at schools. Is because we're legally mandated to adopt new materials, is that an issue that some schools are not starting it right away?
Well, in the elementary district, we are required to have an intervention adopted by the district. In our program improvement schools, there is one that's waiting, and we're going to try to see if we can get it going like second semester if possible. There are interventions in place, but it's not the state board approved one. So no one from CDE is going to come down and say you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. We want to make sure that we have everything in place in all the schools and the staff's on board with it. Otherwise, it won't work at those schools. So we're getting it in place as soon as possible.
There is one other thing that I just want to clarify, and that is we're getting federal stimulus money in several different pots. And I was hearing a little bit of confusion earlier about this. This is federal stimulus Title I money that's being spent on it. This is not the federal stimulus money that we can put towards our budget problems. This is strictly for Title I students and for Title I schools. Correct, Dr. White?
Yes, it's Title I, and it'll be used for the Title I schools, but the other funding, like the restricted lottery, is what we need to use, and those monies can't be swept into the general fund either.
Right. Okay.
We have two requests to speak, but I've explained to both that public comment was a while back. I just want to recognize Mr. Todd Borden is here, who wanted to speak on that, and Lane Wheeler, who says that if he can't speak, please know that there may be contract issues involved. So thanks for the update.
All right. With that, is there a motion?
So maybe I shouldn't be the one to make the motion, since I caught, maybe one of the others.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It passes 4-0. Thank you. With that, we move on to item D7, approval of EduSoft Assessment Management System License Agreement. And Mr. Herron, was that you also?
Yeah, I just, what's the total? 42, 60, 62, $63,000 is a lot of money for one program, especially in light of the fact that we just approved a program that we have no money for this kind of support, in essence, or some of this support. And I just want to make sure that we're getting 50% more time. If we go from 45,000 and add another 22.5 for primary or elementary, are we going to get 50% more time? And do we really need to, how long, and you answered this question, so I'm happy with, but how long do we have to keep paying this $45,000 for the exact same job description? That was my main question. I think you said we're getting more time. I'm hoping we're getting 50% more time.
Right, and I don't know if Cynthia wants to add something, but of course we're bringing on all the elementary, and so we're having EduSoft training everywhere and in small groups, and so that it really rolls out very smoothly. So far, it's going very well. well received. So the goal is, of course, to be completely self-sustained, not need to have training, this exact training.
If there's no further discussion, I'll move for approval.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes 4-0. D9, approval of enhancing education through technology competitive grants. Mr. Herron.
I'll move for approval.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
It
I
passes.
didn't say aye, but aye.
It passes 4-0. Then we pop up to item D15, approval of pesticide use for gopher and squirrel control at San Marcos and Dos Pueblos High Schools.
And I have a really specific question about this that is probably not what anybody was considering, but it's on page 4 or 5, the second bullet from the bottom. It says live animals should be humanely dispatched using the trap euthanasia box constructed by the district for live capture. And then it goes on to explain how they're going to be euthanized. I'm wondering if there is any possibility of if you trap live animals, of relocating them rather than having to euthanize all of them. Well, I was thinking maybe your lawn, but
These would be animals that have taken the bait that are not yet dead, and that in order to not prolong the agony of the animal, and it's important that in the morning that the grounds people, walk the whole grounds and look for any animals that may be in this state to make sure that they're not there when students and staff show up, and to remove them from the site. But when you find them, they need to be treated humanely.
so these are animals that would not survive.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Move to
Mrs.
approve.
Wolf-
I'm
Mrs. Deacon?
sorry.
Wait, no, I had a couple questions too. It says district staff will be responsible for monitoring the dead and dying squirrels. Who exactly is going to do that?
For most part, it will be the groundskeepers at the sites.
Robin.
And they're there in the summer.
They're there early.
Daily.
Both Dos Pueblos and San Marcos have groundskeepers that are probably among the first people that report to that school in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, as having had kids at our high school, I know, what a huge problem these holes are, and I understand it's a significant hazard. I also know that there's at least one member of the public who's raised the question about using falcons, and I hadn't heard this discussion before. Could you just briefly say why that doesn't work?
When we started this process over 2 years ago, we had discussions at that time with using birds of prey, and it was decided that the way to do that is to have the campus completely cleared of all individuals. You don't want anybody on campus when that happens. The birds usually go for the prey early in the morning, and our population is such that a falcon or a owl is not going to put a dent in it. We have hundreds upon hundreds of squirrels, and we have not stopped the trapping process. We've not just let this thing set. We've been actively trapping for gophers and squirrels at both Dos Pueblos and San Marcos. Of course, San Marcos, we did do the gassing, but we did not do the bait. If you remember from 2 years ago when we had the approval, we were trying to err on the side of caution by using the least amount of pesticide possible. In hindsight, we probably should have used a little bit more, and maybe we won't have the problem today that we have at San Marcos. And so, like I say, this has been like a 3-year process, and we've looked at other steps. We've coordinated with and got information from Phil Boyce, as the board directed us to 2 years ago. We went to our experts, Santos, at the city, for their IPM committee, and conferred with him about the proper steps and the next steps. And I need to say publicly that this district has done a great job, a fantastic job, as a matter of fact, in reducing pesticide use over the years. And because we've reduced it so much and our list is so small, when we do something, it needs board approval, and it becomes a very public item rather than doing it as routine.
Any other questions or comments? Mrs. Cordero, you made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. It passes 4-0. That brings us to D16, which, can we just have a motion on that, please?
Move to approve.
Is there a second? This is the approval of the proposal from Urban Ag Ecology for integrated pest management technical assistance with ground squirrel baiting at San Marcos and Dos Pueblos High Schools. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 4-0. And we had pulled item D18, and we're not coming, oh, yes, we are. Mr. Hetyon, can you tell us why we pulled D18 real quickly? And this was,
Well,
it was
D-
because of Mr.
yeah,
Smith's comment on the benefits?
D18
Okay.
is an annual contract that we've had for a number of years for using outside services to maintain the joint use field at La Colina. We want to look a second time at possible reorganization and maybe saving one or part of an in-district job to do this rather than contracting out. It just didn't make sense to have one hand cutting a job and the other hand taking something of the same type of description and putting it out to contract. And so I want to talk with Mr. Smith and a few other people about the possibility of saving part of a position for not having to award this contract and reallocate resources to still maintain that field at the level we're supposed to maintain it per our joint use agreement.
Okay. We are now on to item H, coming events, which I believe, if we had anything, we've gone over that. The next coming event really is our next board meeting. Board comments and correspondence. Mr. Herron?
I just want to congratulate Dr. Hayden for this 100-page document that is now on the website with all the board parts of all the board focus goals with tremendous graphs and detail and numbers. It'll take me a long time to read it all, but it's quite extensive and well done, and it's a ton of information. So, good job on that.
And we'll be seeing that again and again this next year.
It's a mind-boggling
Yes.
task. I did go to the Esperanza event. They had a celebration where they put out their community report for 2009, and it's quite an extensive document, 26 pages. Yes, and very well done. It was a nice event, and I was very pleased to go and attend.
I will put a copy of that in the board brief, by the way.
I also went to the 25th anniversary education celebration, where we had several of our students given honors, and it was nice to be there with them. It's interesting that the teacher of the year got a pink slip, but she made a fantastic presentation. I mean,
And that
she
was the teacher from San Ynez.
Yes, she wasn't down, she wasn't bitter, at least in that group, and she made a positive out of what her experience will be in the future. So it was a very, very lovely event, and again, I'm glad I went to that. And then as long as all the graduations, I just have to comment that the spread in the local paper, was huge about the graduation ceremonies. And we talked about that earlier, but I thoroughly enjoyed representing the board at the 2 events that I went to.
Other board members? Future agenda items, we talked about CalSafe coming to the board for discussion. Any other items, Mrs. Deacon?
I'm not sure this is something that needs to come to the board, but it did occur to me while graduation is still fresh in everybody's minds, maybe when the principals sit down to talk next time, they might want to share those things that worked well and share ideas for strategies for things that maybe didn't work as well. It seems like maybe a time while
Well, and
everyone's
anything
still
that we can
thinking
do,
about it.
that we as a board can put together
Yeah.
in board policy that
Right.
where they see holes.
Might have some
I think
suggestions.
that'd be a good idea.
yeah.
Mr.
There was an
Herron? Oh, wait.
F-18 at the Dos Pueblos graduation. I just want you to know, which was pretty amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to say, watching the young man march in his Marine uniform from the gate, past the stadiums, onto the stand, there was not an unusual amount of, he didn't get any more attention than anybody else, but it was emotional. It was absolutely beautiful to watch him. And then when he came up for his diploma, I mean, again, he was treated as everybody else, a little bit more excitement, but not dramatically. But it was such an emotional time that I'm sure glad we changed our policy.
And that was a student at San Marcos High School.
At San Marcos High School, yes.
Any other future agenda items?
We do have a special board meeting on June 16, 7 o'clock here. Well, that's
It's
closed session. at
6 o'clock for closed session, 7 o'clock. We're going to have a closed session. Right. All right. With no further comments, questions, I will adjourn this meeting. Good night.